We're Newsroom. Good morning, hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is always live and broadcast from our studios right here in Eldorado Park. Of course, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, we're also live through the streaming facility on YouTube, so you can watch us back on demand there or even live anywhere in the world. Question today, well, drug-related. That's our theme today. How do you view community attacks against drug dealers? We've also seen reverse attacks here in Ennetdale in Johannesburg. Community drug dealers at odds with each other. Young people dying of drug overdoses around the country. What is going on? Well, how do you view this entire scenario that's playing out right now? That's our theme also for today. But of course, lots of news. Big news today. We'll be in the Constitutional Court a little bit later as well. Let's get all the details from our president.
Thank you, Eben. The Constitutional Court is set to hand down judgment in the Nkandla matter later this morning. SABC COO Claudia Motseneng calls on BRICS nations to invest in each other. And the stay away by the KwaZulu-Natal taxi operators comes to an end as an agreement is reached. Now, those are all the top stories that we have for you this morning. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Elvis, good morning to you. It is a very big sporting day as well. In fact, going into the weekend, quite a lot's happening there. Good morning to you at home as well. This is what we've got for you in the sports.
Pulled away, pulled all the way. What a way to go through to a final.
England storm into the final as they peak at the right time and crush previously unbeaten New Zealand by 7 wickets with a whopping 17 balls remaining. And Shakes Mashaba and his staff set to meet with their bosses later today. Novak Djokovic eases into the Miami Open semi-finals, destroying big serving Thomas Berdych 6-3, 6-3. I'll also be chatting to Jody Hendricks at about 10:20 about the selection of the Springbok coach expected for tomorrow. Be tuned for all of that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this morning. The Constitutional Court is set to hand down judgment in the Nkandla matter. The highest court in the land will rule on whether President Jacob Zuma has to comply with the Public Protector's recommendations that he should pay for some of the upgrades at his Nkandla residence. The EFF and the DA brought the application to the court earlier this year. The Democratic Alliance says they believe the judgment will be a defining moment for the country. Now, for the latest on the story, Eldrin St. Pierre is at the Constitutional Court to set the scene for us. A very good morning to you, Eldrin. Let's take a look at some of the main expectations from this judgment today. Or before we actually start with that question, paint us a picture as what is currently happening there.
Well, good morning, Elvis. Quite a large media contingent here outside the Constitutional Court as expected, but certainly the numbers inside the public gallery not as large as we saw during the arguments that were set down, and also outside here the Constitutional Hill precinct as well. Remember that last time we had different protesters, the EFF's large march from the Johannesburg CBD all the way to the Constitutional Court, as well as DA members picketing here outside the court, and a few number of COPE members. And this time around we've just seen the leadership of COPE, which is here, as well as the leadership of the DA. We're still waiting for the EFF, which brought the main application to the Constitutional Court for their leadership to arrive, but we are expecting that they will be here in court, because certainly this is a landmark case, not only on the powers of the Public Protector, but also the political implications that this court case will have for the President as well as the ANC.
Talking about those implications, the political implications, what could they be for the ruling party as well as for the President?
Well, certainly, if you look at the political implications of this issue, and if you look at the remarks, certainly, of the new chief whip of the ANC, is the issue around the handling of the Nkandla matter. Jackson Mthembu saying that the matter of Nkandla could have been handled much, much better. There's also the Nhleko report. Nhleko, remember that Police Minister Nhleko saying that the President has absolutely no obligation to pay any of the money spent on the upgrades at Nkandla. He also indicated in that report that there are certainly some upgrades that still are needed at the President's home in Nkandla that are still needed. And remember back then when that report was released and the remarks from Nhleko, the ANC's Secretary General Kwere Mantashe saying that those remarks are certainly reckless to be making those remarks, considering that this is such a huge issue. Also, the ANC in Gauteng saying that there's no position from the ANC with regards to spending more money on upgrading the President's homestead or maintaining of some of the security features that are not fully functional at Nkandla.
Now, if the court decision goes the way of the applicants, what will that mean for the executive or for government itself?
Well, certainly, first of all, it will be embarrassing for the Speaker of Parliament, firstly, considering that there was the ad hoc committee that was set up. First was set up in 2014, just before the end of the fourth Parliament, and that ad hoc committee, all the arguments, rather, in that ad hoc, the first ad hoc committee on Nkandla that was set up, the issue around whether the President should be called, whether the President should be subpoenaed to appear before the ad hoc committee, and whether the Public Protector, Thuli Madonsela, should be called to give statements or testimony in front of the ad hoc committee. That ad hoc committee didn't come to a conclusion. The ad hoc committee was then revived during the fifth Parliament, after the fifth Parliament was elected and inducted in Parliament. And that ad hoc committee was only members of the ANC after opposition parties decided that they will not be part of these arguments, or rather part of the ad hoc committee that will not be able to bring forward the President or subpoena the President to make sure that the President answered to some of the questions. And one of those parties that was not part of the ad hoc committee was the DA, and the DA's James Salve joins me now. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us this morning. Certainly, let's first go back to that decision, deciding not to be part of the ad hoc committee, which eventually found that the President should not be held liable.
Yes, well, at a particular point, the ad hoc committee became a complete farce. We put arguments forward. The ANC would reject those arguments. They were not prepared to listen to any evidence outside of the reports that were before us, and we believed that we were wasting our time and validating a process that was illegal and unconstitutional.
It seems certainly embarrassing if you consider the concessions from the President during heads of arguments here at the Constitutional Court, that the findings of the Public Protector are binding. You can't review the findings, and you can't have parallel investigations like you had with the the Police Ministry's investigation as well.
Indeed, but I think that the turning point there came when our case in the Supreme Court of Appeal against the appointment of Mr. Claudi Motsoeneng was heard. And the Supreme Court of Appeal held that the remedial action could not be summarily rejected or ignored, and that if you wanted to challenge it, you had to take that on review. And once that judgment came out, the President changed his tune.
And certainly, if you remember that Supreme Court of Appeal ruling, the application came after the High Court ruled otherwise, saying that actually the findings of the Public Protector are not binding. But this time around, we have the Constitutional Court that will make a final ruling on the powers of the Public Protector and bring clarity around what her findings are. Are they mere recommendations or are they binding?
Well, certainly we believe that they are binding unless they're taken on review. And it was a unanimous decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal in the DA versus Motsoeneng matter. So we really do believe that the Constitutional Court will come to the same conclusion.
It's the end of the argument around the powers of the Public Protector. Certainly it happens right here, but it's not the end of the Nkandla matter. We also have Minenhle Makhanya, who is the architect of the President, being sued by the SIU for about 155 million rand. We're still waiting for Public Works Department to bring those officials that have been implicated to book.
Yes, it's a complete mess, and it will continue to be a mess. But at least in this application, we ought to get clarity about the Public Protector's powers. We ought also to get clarity about whether Parliament actually conducted itself properly once it had received the Public Protector's report, because in our view, Parliament abrogated its responsibilities and did not hold the executive to account. We also hope that some clarity will come out of this judgment as to whether or not the President bona fide believed that he did not have to adhere to the remedial action, or whether this was a deliberate violation of the Constitution.
Just a final question, Mr. Self, before I let you go. For the DA, what does this court ruling mean heading forward into Parliament? Because the DA certainly was the first one to take the case to the Public Protector, who eventually came to a finding in 2014.
Yes, well, for our point of view is it would be great if we got clarity about the powers of the Public Protector. But even more so, I would like the court to rule as to whether or not Parliament actually carried out its functions properly, because this has implications if we were to bring a motion to impeach the President. Because in that circumstance, if there has been a de facto violation of the Constitution, we expect every member of Parliament to carry out his or her constitutional duty and vote for that motion.
The argument from some who've been following this case quite closely as well as some of the numerous other votes of no confidence that the DA has brought against the President, those have failed. What are the chances of this happening, hypothetically speaking, should the Constitutional Court make that declaratory order?
Well, we would then expect members of Parliament to remember the oath that they took to uphold the Constitution and carry out their constitutional duty. To do less than that would be to shirk their duty.
Well, thank you, Mr. James South there from the DA with regards to today's ruling that's expected. And as I've indicated, that this is certainly not the last time we'll be hearing arguments around the Nkandla matter. First of all, there's also Minenhle Makanya, who have indicated that the SIU is suing for about 155 million rand. That is the architect of President Jacob Zuma, who designed the Nkandla architecture there at the President's homestead. The other issue is around the officials who have been implicated in this public works program with regards to the Nkandla project. And of course, what does this, or what finality with the Constitutional Court come to when it comes to Police Minister Ntleko's findings that the President is not liable to pay any money? The President's lawyers, or the council, has already indicated that, as they put it, they put no reliance on that report.
Thank you, Eldrin St-Pierre, and you'll keep us updated as it unfolds there at the Constitutional Court. That's our reporter, Eldrin St-Pierre, live. You have to stay tuned. We'll bring you the Constitutional Court live a little bit later, so don't go away. Do not touch that remote. Let's now move to KZN. An agreement between the KwaZulu-Natal Transport Department and two taxi organizations has seen the resumption of taxi operations in the province. The department, Sintaco, and the KwaZulu-Natal Taxi Alliance agreed to resume the operations and release over 200 taxis that were impounded for operating without valid permits. Commuters were left stranded yesterday when taxi operations were halted. Now today, our theme, we are looking at the drug situation in the country, and specifically in various communities. Very important question that we pose to you today as well. That question is on your screen right now. We're asking you, what do you make of what's currently happening in our communities, where the communities are fighting back against the drug lords and the drugs in the community? And then, of course, there's retaliation from the drug dealers on to the community and the activists. And we'd like to find out from you, what's your comment around that? Let us know on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Now, 3 years ago, Darylene James, a resident of Eldorado Park in the south of Joburg, and a mother of a 17-year-old who got addicted to tech while at school, had enough. And she decided to take on the whole system. After much abuse at the hands of her son, who stole household goods to feed his habit, and the fear of seeing him turn into a violent monster, in May 2013, she authored an open letter to the state president of South Africa, addressing him as Dad. The president, Jacob Zuma, later visited the community of Eldorado Park, who had enough drugs and drug lords parading the community. During his visit, he expressed dismay at the disaster and pledged his support by promising to shut down all the lolly lounges in the area. The question that we pose is what happened since then, and what is the latest regarding the fight against drugs and drug lords in Eldorado Park and the surrounding areas? The author of the open letter to the President, Darylene James, and founder of Sharing Without Shame, a centre which focuses on prevention, treatment and aftercare, now joins us on the line. Darylene, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
First and foremost, tell us what is the latest in relation to the fight against drug lords and drugs in the communities?
Well, the latest, we've just had a 3-month operation where we've piloted. We called in a special team from Cape Town that was on the ground, that was assisting the community. We've seen quite a few arrests taking place, but we still have the challenge of the justice system. And I've always been saying, no matter how many arrests we make, if the NPA is not on board, it is a fruitless exercise.
Now, we understand there were attacks on drug activists last week. Tell us more about that in Annandale.
Yes, that is happening in Annandale. Some of our fellow activists out there, their homes were petrol bombed last week by drug dealers. You've also seen the community of Annandale standing up. They've had enough, and it just so happened that in last week they were protesting at some of these drug dealers' homes. And the drug dealers actually had the nerve of retaliating and bombing 4 homes in Eldorado Park. Luckily, one of the homes had CCTV TV, and, you know, that evidence was on television, but unfortunately I don't know how our justice system works. That case was actually withdrawn from court with the evidence, and the person is out on free bail.
Mm-hmm. Now, as the community, as in Eldorado Park and the surrounding areas, what are you doing to win this war against drugs in the area?
The community is very active, I must say. We've been, in terms of getting our confidence back and realizing that we're the majority and we can actually take a stand, we've been collecting a lot of information. We've been forwarding a lot of tip-offs to SABC. You know, there's a lot of campaigning happening in the community. Everybody, the stakeholders, everybody's playing their role. But the only thing is lacking at the moment is we're not seeing enough support from the relevant departments. We're not seeing access to rehabilitation. There's no centers. All the rehabs are full. We're still seeing the drug dealers being arrested today, despite our participation and involvement, and they're out 2 days later. There's no stricter sentences. There's no wash. You know, we're not hurting their pockets, basically. They get out on free bail. So are we actually impacting the community?
Mm-hmm. If anybody wants to assist Darylene, how do they get in touch with you, and can they assist?
Yes, they can. They can drop their email on info@stopdrugs.co.za. Alternatively, they can give me a call on 494-1363.
Darylene James, thank you.
494-1363.
Darylene, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on Newsroom. That was the author of the open letter to President Jacob Zuma, Darylene Elana James, and also the founder of Sharing Without Shame, a centre which focuses on prevention, treatment and aftercare. Now, we're going to continue this theme today. Let's go over to Eben.
Yeah, obviously it's not just a concern in one place here in South Africa. It seems to be a nationwide problem. There's growing concern in and around the Durban townships that if the suppliers of the recent deadly drugs or deadly ecstasy named Mercedes or Mercedes-Benz, they're not arrested soon, the worst is then still to come, they say. This drug is believed to be a combination of ecstasy and some other narcotics. The 4 learners in KwaMashu who experimented with this new drugs have lost their lives, while others have been admitted to hospital. Now, to talk to us a little bit more about this, but also the wider problem we're facing with drugs in South Africa, I'm joined in studio by Quinton van Kerken, who is the South African Chief Executive for the Anti-Drug Alliance here. He's also a recovering drug addict, or a former drug addict, but you're always recovering, aren't you?
No, I think at some stage you get to a point where you just get too old for it.
It's interesting that you say that, but let me get back to the initial story and the question that we're asking. It seems in our communities that our communities are starting to fight a war with drug lords, and drug lords in turn, we're seeing they're retaliating in turn. And is this the face of a drug war in South Africa that will escalate?
I think we need to get our language right, because initially everybody says it's a war against drugs. No, you can't declare war on a noun. So we have to realize that this is definitely a war with people. Yes, I think as communities get more and more angry, we're going to see a lot more violence. But the thing is, I think they're outmanned and outgunned when it comes to organised crime. Organised crime has got all the weapons available, and to say that we've lost the drug war would probably be realistic at this stage.
Yeah, and so much money being wasted. But just have a look. Let's talk about addiction and sort of how it starts for everybody. Here we've got some of the numbers in South Africa. This is when we start to be exposed to this kind of thing, and at times it's almost trivial exposure, one would think. It's having a drink at 10 or 11, or in my case, I was stealing drinks off the table, and my dad and them were having a good time at night at that sort of age. Prescribed drugs, age 11, hallucinogens, 12, marijuana and hashish, 13, 14, and then crack, cocaine, and heavier stuff from 15, 16 onwards. You agree with that kind of appraisal, or what's the experience that you have?
I think we have to, we really have to look geographically, but yeah, I would say the first exposure to drugs is anywhere between 11 and 13. I wouldn't be able to say the exact type of drug, because that's difficult to say. It also depends on geography. Somebody in Atlantis, for instance, isn't going to have the first experience that someone in Houghton has.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the NIH's drug experimentation statistics. 70% will have had alcohol by the time they leave school. Half would have taken an illegal drug, 40% would have smoked a cigarette, and more than 20% would have used a prescription drug for non-medical purposes. And that maybe is one of the things that parents we're not really aware of, is that the stuff that's in your medicine cabinet at home can also be a place to start. That said, the scary thing is not only the drugs that's easily available, it's the drugs that are killing children, that are hitting the market from unscrupulous drug dealers and suppliers. And in the case that we've seen, the Mercedes-Benz ecstasy pills, how do you view that incident, and is this something that we're going to see more of happening in South Africa?
You know what, I did look into it. Well, our organisation looked into it. We got hold of a lot of people, and we looked at history as well. These things do happen. As soon as you have illicit drugs, you have to understand that they're not made in a laboratory the same way a pharmaceutical drug would be made. The guys are going to try and adulterate the actual substance to make it more profitable. I don't know if this is going to pop up again. I fear that it will, but I really don't know. It's difficult to say. At the end of the day, drug dealers unfortunately have a reputation to uphold as well, and if they keep selling bad drugs to people, people aren't going to go to them. So it's not in their best interest to sell these kind of drugs to people either.
Do we have enough of an understanding of the illegal trade, both as, I suppose, community, civil society, but also the law and so forth?
I don't think so. I don't think people really understand the problem with drugs. I've said it often, drugs aren't really the problem. The fact addiction is the problem. Drugs have always been there, will always be there. How we legislate them and how we control them is actually key in this scenario.
I've got a slide here, and maybe you can tell us about this. We're talking about a human being from the age of 5 until the age of 20, and here you see the blue bits at the beginning. It's the parts of the brain that matures last, and unfortunately for human beings, self-control that sits in the front. Self-control is the last part of the brain to mature, and that's why we have this problem with young people in their teens being addicted way before they can even think about what really is good for them and what they really want or need out of life.
You see, early use of drugs does just that. As you can clearly see, certain substances have a way of just actually making the part of our brain that actually helps us think rationally not work.
Yeah.
And what we're doing is, what we're finding is there's a whole generation of young people that are now sort of getting a bit older and going into their 20s that started drugs early, that really have no, as you say, self-control. They can't really fit into society, and it's a very difficult scenario for them because now they're deciding to actually stop using drugs, and they have no life skills, no emotional quotient either.
What more can we do? We see many campaigns, and it feels to me as if more people are getting higher now, more than ever before. These campaigns, are they working? Or should we be spending our money elsewhere?
Look, government's spending billions and billions of rands a year on the drug war. I think we need to have a radical change in thinking. Clearly, the way that we are thinking, the current laws are simply not working properly. So let's look at completely different ways of thinking. I was on an interview last night with somebody from the Hawks, and they said, yes, they're kind of looking at that. No, we want definitive changes in the law. It does not help actually punishing somebody for having a problem. And this is where we are at the moment.
Well, what about the discussions then around legalization of marijuana and so forth? Is this something that we have to consider?
We have to consider that 100%. I think that is key to everything. You have to understand that cannabis or marijuana or dacha in South Africa attributes for about 60% of all arrests for possession alone. Now, if we have to legalize it and allow people to make certain choices, I'm not saying it won't be abused. I am saying that if we have to legalize it and put it into certain frameworks, we'll immediately see, a 60% drop in drug-related crime arrests?
And international benchmarking, where are we? What's happening in places where it's been legalized? Is the overall drug picture is improving, isn't it?
The drug picture is improving. I mean, we look at places like Portugal, where I think it was just on 2000 that they decriminalized all drugs, strange enough. They've got just over 30% drop in crime across the board. We're looking at places like Colorado in the US, where They got very scared that marijuana sales were going to go crazy. They've plateaued out. They're seeing that it's almost predictable exactly how much they're going to sell. They're very happy because the government is making tax money. They're educating kids. Health, they're actually contributing to health as well. And the nice part is people are actually funding the very system that they need should they need help.
In a nutshell, that was it, Quentin. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank
Quentin
you so
van
much.
Kerken is the Chief Executive for the Anti-Drug Alliance here in South Africa. We're talking, of course, about drugs in general, ecstasy in particular this morning, after, of course, four teenagers were killed in KwaMashu Township last week for taking dodgy drugs. We'll continue this discussion, but, of course, today is a big day here in South Africa. The Constitutional Court is expected to hand down judgment on the much vaunted Nkandla matter. There have been lots of comments on this. Let's have a look at what some of the tweets that are coming in. Of course, we're waiting for matters to get underway at the High Court. There you see DA leader Musi Maimane standing outside the Constitutional Court here in Johannesburg, facing the media. I'm sure today will be a big day for the DA as this matter proceeds to the court. We'll be live inside the court this morning at about, I'm taking a guess, shortly after 10 o'clock. It's set down to start at 10, but in its previous, the last time we were in the Constitutional Court, it started 10 minutes earlier. So we'll be on our tippy toes and to make sure that we get this judgment, because it'll be a very short one, I'm sure. It won't be a very long one. Yeah, some of your tweets with regards to this. Can't really read it. Can you put it up for me, Johan? Thank you very much. Lebo says, I will be in attendance on Concord today, via Twitter, of course. Watching SA Politics these days is like watching a movie premiere. Yes, it's very exciting these days. iBuff talks about, got my feet up and popcorn ready for the Concord ruling. Miss Buffin, it'll be very quick. It won't be a whole day affair, I can tell you that. Then, the fundraiser says, there will be many interpretations to the Concord Declaration, and each person will analyze based on their own understanding. Yes, understanding, bias, their own subjective ideas. Bettina Weingaard says, the moment of truth is upon us. Yes, Nkandla, the Concord ruling today. Then, Boot Mohapi says, the day we have all been waiting for, Concord, hashtag pay back the money. Who can forget about that? That slogan has gone all around the world. Anyhow, time for us to take the same trip as we look at the front pages around the globe this morning. We'll start in New York, where the International New York Times reports that global warming could cause the Western Arctic ice sheet to disintegrate within decades, according to a new study. Having enough water into the ocean to raise the sea level as much as 3 feet by the end of this century. Wow, I will be long dead by then. Moving to Australia, the Daily Telegraph says Sydney Mayor Clover Moore is said to scrap booze bans in dozens of the streets and parks across central Sydney. Finally, the United States, the USA Today, reports that Donald Trump just told America that he thinks women who have illegal abortions should face some sort of punishment. Yes, the Donald is on the campaign trail. Whoever calls himself the Donald. Anyhow, let's take a look at what's happening in the courts here in South Africa today. Of course, here in Johannesburg, none bigger than this one. Constitutional Court, of course, set to hand down the judgment in the Nkandla matter. Now we're waiting to go live at around 10 o'clock this morning. The court will rule on whether President Jacob Zuma has to comply with the public protector's recommendations that he should pay some form of compensation for the upgrades at his Nkandla residence. Then we're down in Durban. The Magistrates Court there is expected to hand down in its decision to the bail application of the 5 learners charged with the rape of a fellow learner, also aged 15 years old. The court has joined 5 other minors facing a similar charge of rape, bringing the number of accused to 10 now. Then we go to Bloemfontein. The IPID is investigating a case of perjury against Hawks boss Burning Ntlemeza. Ntlemeza is petitioning the Supreme Court of Appeal, that's the SCA in Bloemfontein, to overturn a Durban High Court ruling ordering him to reinstate Boyson. Ntlemeza suspended Boyson, claiming that he and the men tasked with investigating a police officer's assassination fraudulently received a monetary reward for shooting dead 6 men. A very interesting case on this very channel. We'll keep you updated how that one developed. Now, of course, today we're waiting for the Constitutional Court to get underway, but we're also talking about the scourge of drugs in our communities. And our question, of course, today relates directly to that. We want you to tell us, what do you make of communities, vigilante attacks on drug dealers? It's now in the reverse. Drug dealers are attacking community activists. Is it bubbling out of control? Send us your views at SABC Newsroom. Before we go to a break, let's go to Aldrin Samper, who's standing by outside the Constitutional Court. Very good morning to you, Aldrin. Just give us a quick update. It seems to be getting busy there. I saw Musi Maimane facing the media a second ago.
Well, certainly it is getting busy outside the Constitutional Court. This is, of course, a landmark case, and as we've indicated before, that this is a case that will bring clarity around the powers of the public protector. While the EFF, which brought the application to the Constitutional Court, they don't have a representative here as yet, but we spoke to the spokesperson earlier on, and they've indicated that there will be a press briefing immediately after this ruling, round about 12 o'clock, and the public protector as well will not be at this ruling. There will be a press briefing as well later on, just after this court ruling in Pretoria at the office of the public protector. We also have Bantu Olomisa from the UDM. We also saw COPE spokesperson Dennis Bloom earlier on, also here at the Constitutional Court. Both those two parties are not applicants in this matter, but right now I'm joined by the Deputy Public Protector, Kevin Malunga, who is sitting in for the Public Protector, who have indicated will not be here to listen into this ruling. Certainly, as everybody's been saying, that this is a landmark case and we will get clarity around the powers of the Public Protector.
Absolutely. This is a great day for constitutional democracy in South Africa, in the sense that there will be clarification once and for all as to how you engage these various pillars of our democracy, these various pillars of accountability. You may be aware that the Constitution makes it very clear that the courts are the final arbiters of disputes, which is what is happening today. And of course, there was an acknowledgement by the founders of the Constitution that the courts alone cannot do it. And government cannot be allowed to be a law unto itself ultimately. So that is why these institutions were created. There was an understanding that there shouldn't be a state that becomes too powerful or becomes too insensitive and so forth, or irresponsible in many ways. So hence these institutions. It's a great day which also affirms that the rule of law is at work in South Africa, in the sense that we don't take out machetes and start chopping each other up. We take things to court, we take things to the public protector. And what I want to plead with South Africans out there is, once you see this, at work, bring things to us. Don't shoot each other. I will give you an example in Bloemfontein. And of course, I think Durban and here in Gauteng, I've actually been handling matters involving taxi drivers. You sit around a table and we resolve these things using the law and policy. So that is the spirit in which we want to see things moving on. And of course, even service delivery. And in other words, and it should also be a lesson to government itself to say, look, you have to be accountable. These are public resources and all. These are things, there's got to be a sense of responsibility. I have no doubt that the government has that spirit in mind. But there's always a sense of an official who is irresponsible or who wants to please the boss and gets carried away and goes too far. And these are the things that have to be reined in, because this is ultimately the future of this country at play.
And just speaking politically, the Office of the Public Protector has also come after a lot of criticism. If you consider this case, especially the Nkandla case, the ANC back in 2014 accusing the Public Protector of trying to sway voters ahead of the general elections back in 2014. There was also the issue around the timing of the release, and we saw that the executive taking the Public Protector to court, trying to stop the release of the report. How do you ensure that the relationship between a government and the Public Protector, and certainly the political parties, are amended?
I think there have been a lot of lessons learned all the way around. We have learned ours, and I certainly hope and believe that the state and the various political parties have learned theirs. We operate in terms of the Constitution, Chapter 9 of the Constitution, without fear or favor. We do our work and perform our mandate in line with the law and facts and principles and policies. If you read reports of the Public Protector, they are not thumbsucks. They are well researched. They are written by very qualified, very skilled investigators. You know, we as Public Protector, Deputy Public Protector, and Public Protector, we are heads of the institution. We lead a team, and I think that's what the narrative has to that is never brought out. And these things are not just people dreaming things up. We don't complain to ourselves. We work with complaints that come into the system, and every South African is our stakeholder. And certainly a suggestion that the work is political is actually quite naive and quite unfortunate. And I hope that the political discourse will certainly improve in future. This is an institution that was created to safeguard South Africans, everyone. And you'll be surprised that sometimes even senior officials in government themselves come to us when they feel that they've been ill-treated by the same government. So it's sometimes it could be Aldrin Sampear who says, no, SABC has not treated me right. So it's everyone who really comes. It's everybody's kitchen, so to speak, and we guard that quite jealously.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, that is the Deputy Public Protector, Kevin Malunga, there speaking around the expectations of the Public Protector. And one thing that you should note is that the Public Protector, as the term comes to an end later this year, around about October, she is expected to launch a book. So certainly we might get some details around how this Nkandla matter has impacted not only the work of the public officer, but also the work of her personal life as well. Right now, let's go to a quick ad break, and we'll continue with the coverage from the Constitutional Court around the Nkandla judgment. We can now go to a quick ad break.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Welcome back. As you know, our theme today is on drugs, the war against drugs. Now, we heard earlier that it's not the war against drugs, it's more the war against the person selling the drugs. But the 26th of June is marked as the National Substance Abuse Awareness Day, and it is hoped that SADC will create awareness of the drug abuse problem and their hotline that's available to help you, all South Africans that are using drugs. Now, drug abuse in South Africa is somehow not new, but the problem is on the rise. So many people who have indulged in the use of this habit may need help, and they need counseling. Now, to help us with this and to understand this is Lefate Mukunyane from SADC, who is here with us in studio. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you.
First and foremostly, if we take a look at the scourge of drugs and drug abuse, especially among the youth, is that becoming a common problem in South Africa in terms of the number of calls that you receive?
It is an increasing problem. Mm-hmm. And also, I think what we need to take into account is how we are socialized within society, popular youth culture, mm-hmm. The role of music, the role of hip-hop, the role of entertainment industry generally. Mm-hmm. And also how young people are aspirational. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to prove themselves, they're trying to define themselves. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the factors that are also hide behind this a growing need to experiment and use drugs. Because if you see other brands are positioning themselves in line with aspirations of young people. And also some of the factors that are also at play play a role in terms of the high rate, it's the bad socioeconomic conditions within society. Young people are unemployed, young people are from broken homes, young people are facing traumatic experiences, whether it can be related to crime, it can be related to rape, it can just be frustration out of life. Mm-hmm. Those are some of the factors that are driving a young people that have an influence on the mental state of a young person, mm-hmm. and ultimately contributing to that. And then at SADC, we plus minus we're receiving about 20 calls. On
a daily basis?
Yeah, but these are intertwined calls in terms of substance abuse, and because you substance abuse on its own, it's also a mental health disorder. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So is it mostly young people affected by this, or is it across the board?
It is actually across the board, mm-hmm. but there's an increase among young people, mm-hmm. Especially young people simply because of those factors that I've really outlined. And as you know, in terms of statistics, young people have actually more compared to older people.
Now, you have a number of telephone numbers where people can contact you, but before we get that, we'll put it on the screen for the audience as well. But before we get to that particular point, what happens to these people that call in to find counseling from SADC? What happens thereafter? Because it can't just be a telephonic interview or a telephonic discussion and it's over.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. And that's why there's a need for a systematic, concerted effort nationally to try to really address this challenge. Young people will call in and then they will receive telephone counseling, and then we refer them to rehabilitation centers. And where there's a need, maybe for instance for a professional, maybe counseling, maybe with a therapist, mm-hmm. Whether a psychiatrist or psychologist, therefore will then link a young person to that. But I think what is of concern, it's really ensuring that this challenge is not only a responsibility of the professionals, your teachers, like your policemen or your psychologists or social workers or the clinics, but also even in the heart of the family. All family members need to play a role so that then they're not perceived as negative members of society. Mm-hmm. And also, even when they're experimenting, when they're still starting, we need to intervene, not just to relax and stay back until these young people are hooked. And also, sometimes we look down on even the role of religion, for example, even churches. Also, they can play a role, and also youth activities like sports, entertainments. We need to have a collective effort in trying to address that.
Now, we've seen a number of youth in KwaZulu-Natal died recently from a new drug called Mercedes, so probably it's driving very fast. But if these drugs are so freely available, what are you hearing from the calls that you receive? Where do they get it so easily and available on the streets?
You know, in terms of some of the feedback that we get, young people are also saying that in one street they would have 1 or 2 or 3 suppliers per street, and it's very unfortunate. And that means society will know about the suppliers. And also, I think the most important thing is how they are using entertainment. Whether it's group parties, whether it's house parties, whether it's block parties, whether it's just really hanging out and chilling. So that then it's perceived, it's really a way of really distressing or just seeking entertainment. Those are some of the gaps that are actually manipulated, and it's easy for young people to be captured in such platforms.
So if that is the case, and communities know about this, and the police know about this, how do we then curb this as a community, as a society, to make sure that our youth do not fall in this trap, the drug hell?
I think the great challenge here is to really impose a challenge on individual young people, to really realize that despite the bad things that may surround them, whether it's at home, there's just hopelessness at home, there's poverty at home, whether there's just really unhappiness, maybe that may have resulted from a traumatic experience or other bad experiences, it's important on individuals to really take a stand and say, no, I'm not going to be part of the statistics. And then number two, also family members, we need also to pay attention as parents. All the siblings need to pay attention also to provide supportive role. So that then they should not only see this as a delinquency, but also mental health can also play a role. A person can just be depressed, and a person can simply be angry and feel that there's a need to really up their spirits, up their entertainment by maybe using drugs. And of course, with entertainment, we need also to be careful there so that then we are not people who can just really fall trap into it. I know that, for instance, even the Department of Education has introduced strategies. Various government departments also have strategies in terms of trying to deal with drugs. But unfortunately, it boils down to an individual also again, and also ensuring that all these other sectors are also playing a role in curbing this problem.
Just one number that people can get hold of you quickly?
Certainly. People can call us on 0800 567 567. And people can also SMS us, especially young people. Send us an SMS, 31393. 31393.
Thank you so much for your time, Lefato, and joining us here. Now, that was Lefato Makunyane from SADC, who's here with us in our Johannesburg studios. Well, the Concord is about to start, I think. Well, let's go to Eben to find out. Eben?
Yeah, but we're still counting down, I think, to the Constitutional Court, of course, in Nkandla matter, the judgment. We're waiting for that. The whole nation is waiting for that. Are we ready at the Constitutional Court? Okay. Not yet. We're going to go to Durban. I can tell you that the Durban KwaZulu-Natal police are hard on the tails of those drug suppliers of the toxic ecstasy tablets. Of course, they were called Mercedes-Benz, or Mercedes, if you can remember, that claimed the lives of 4 youngsters there last week. Undercover detectives from the Inanda Police Task Team, including Hawks members, are working round the clock to find and shut down the prevalence of these drugs on the streets before more lives are lost. The 4 youngsters were from KwaMashu Township, as you can recall. Now, to talk to us about the latest within the investigation, anti-drug activist of the Chatsworth-based Anti-Drug Forum, Sam Pillay. A very good morning to you, Mr. Pillay. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Pillay, just give us a quick update. What's happening with what's the latest in the Mercedes ecstasy case now?
Well, as far as we know, there is an investigation taking place. They roped in a whole lot of different agencies to actually conduct the investigation, and the interviews have started on Monday already to deal with the victims to find out exactly what happened.
And in the case of Mercedes, do we have an idea what was in these drugs, what these drugs are made up of, and how these drugs are then being made, and how do they end up in the hands of our children?
Well, it is ecstasy. That is a known fact. It's MDMA. And usually when the dealers are using these kind of drugs, or the manufacturer rather, he mixes different things with different drugs, and they call them different names. Mercedes is just one of the many names. There's VWs, and there's a whole range of other names as well for these ecstasy. It is MDMA, which is ecstasy, basically. That is what is known right now.
Which is a party.
And how do they get into...
Yeah, please carry on, sir.
How did they get into the hands of the learners? Well, you know, on end of term, usually, most learners want to have a party. It's like a norm. And the drug dealers know this as well, so they make the drugs available. And the unfortunate thing is, on that particular day, or end of term, usually find the first-time experimenters also being forced into it as well, you know, by the other regular users. And that's what happened here as well. That's why we had more than 50 ending up in hospital. Many of them, you know, some of them were interviewed already, said that they did this for the first time. And the experienced guys will know where the drugs are, and then they go to these kind of places, like the taverns, for example.
Now, we see around the country communities are standing up against drug dealers. We see even here in Ennerdale in Johannesburg now, drug dealers are targeting activists who are mobilizing people against them and so forth. Are we in danger of this matter escalating to this way in most of our communities in South Africa? And how do we keep a handle on it?
Well, you know, I'm working with this problem for 11 years now, on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And we were talking about reducing the supply as well on a regular basis. Yeah, we've been targeted. You know, we had those calls as well. But I think it's important to just keep going on. It's important to get more people involved as well, you know, to fight this really great problem, which is really killing our community. And the more people that join in, the greater success we're going to have. And the more important thing than that is, you know, we need to be innovative, and a new approach needs to be dealt with. How do we deal with this problem from the state point of view as well? Not just the community, but are we dealing with this effectively? You know, is the state dealing with it effectively? Are the agencies dealing with it effectively? I don't think so. I think we can do more. I think we need to have these specialized units, you know, comprising of the SARS, the assets forfeiture, the licensing department, the health department, because just to get hold of a dealer and convict him because he has possession is not going to happen. We need to look at it on a different way, you know, his lifestyle. How did he accumulate so much of money? Because you're not going to find the drugs on most of these guys. They store the drugs someplace else. So we need to have these specialized units. And I think it's absolutely important that we do that. The other thing is, sometimes we hear some good cases of arrest, of where thousands of straws or kilograms of some substance was confiscated. But then the other problem is, how many convictions do we have? So that's another area that of great concern to me as a community activist. The SAPs are doing well in some stages, but the conviction is not happening. You know, I made a list of drug dealers 11 years ago when I started the Anti-Drug Forum. Many of those guys are still on that list. That list is even longer as well.
That's quite scary. Just paint us a picture. 11 years ago, yes, we had a problem, and there were different drugs, and there are more drugs coming into the fray now. But 11 years from now, how has the situation developed and escalated here in South Africa, especially in an area like Chatsworth that you're overseeing?
It's getting bigger. There's no doubt about it. And I think the reason is, we talk about the problem all the time, but we're not dealing with it effectively enough. You know, we need to have new innovative approaches to deal with this problem, like I just mentioned earlier on. The problem, if we don't change our approach to dealing with this problem, we are going to be in serious trouble. We're going to have a lost generation. I'm scared about this. That's why we now are focusing on education and awareness programs in schools. You know, we're not focusing on that enough as well. You know, we talk about, we're reactive when these kind of situations happen, but we're not talking about how we're going to prevent it again in future.
Tell me about cost and access, because these are two key factors. Drugs are, when I grew up, drugs was always seen as a very exclusive and rather expensive habit to have. Is this paradigm changing? Is it becoming cheaper to get high? Are the drugs easier? Is it easier to access drugs for young people now?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are different drugs for different people. You know, there's a price range starting from 5 rands for a pill of Dhaka to hundreds of rands, you know, for the cocaine. So depending on your socioeconomic condition, there's a drug for you. And the dealers know that. And so they have their runners to target the market that they want. They have the runners in different places selling different drugs. So they are catering for everybody across the board now. So it's very, very easily accessible all over the country, at every community, in every community.
We see even older people starting to use drugs for the first time. The tick epidemic on the Cape Flats, we see older people, 60-plussers even starting to use drugs at that kind of space, which is really concerning. It means that it's becoming an endemic thing.
Absolutely.
Where do we go?
Absolutely, it is.
Where do we go from here, though? What would you like to see?
I'd like to see this education and awareness in schools, firstly. You know, we talk about people going to schools and addressing the assemblies and so on with the experiences and so on. And they make some kind of impact, but for how long does the impact last? We have to have sustainable projects in schools. Like we developed a smart club concept where the learners are taking care of themselves. The learners are taking care of themselves. The learners form an organization called a smart club where you have chairperson, treasurer, secretary, and executive committee. And they are dealing with this on an ongoing basis, not just talking about it, but they're doing things like singing, sketches, placard demonstrations, and so on. So it's ongoing, and I think that's the key. We cannot get rid of the drug dealers overnight. It's not going to happen. I resign myself to that. As much as we have to continue. But I think education awareness amongst learners, where they are taking care of themselves in a fun way, they're learning at the same time, is the answer.
I thank you, Mr. Pele. Certainly, we have to teach our children to be leaders in their own lives. I thank you for leaving us with that sentiment. That is Mr. Sam Pele. Of course, he's the local anti-drug activist at the Chatsworth-based Anti-Drug Forum. We can, of course, tell you that the 4 children died of an overdose there in the last couple of weeks. Kwamashu, now, of course, what everybody's waiting for is what Aldrin Simper is standing by for us at the Constitutional Court. Very good morning to you once again. It's getting closer and closer and a little busier there behind you. And there's Mr. Ndlozi behind you as well. Just say hello to him before you go. Let's go over to you, Aldrin.
Well, yes, good morning. It's certainly becoming quite busy outside the Constitutional Court. We're expecting that ruling any minute from now. The judgment is set to be handed down at 10 o'clock. And, of course, we will be carrying that judgment live. Right now, let's just quickly speak to the spokesperson of the EFF. Remember that the EFF is the ones that brought the main application challenging the president's assertion that he has absolutely no obligation to pay back any of the money used on upgrading his Nkandla homestead. Right now, Mbuyisa Ndlozi, thank you so much for joining us. Let's first start with the declaratory order that the EFF is seeking.
Look, I mean, all I can say at the moment is that we're hopeful that the proceedings are going to lead to a judgment that will restore the rule of law in South Africa. Because at the core of this application is that there must be a restoration of the rule of law, that the same rules must apply from the president to the humblest of us in as far as when you break a law is concerned. If I steal money, if I put my hand in the public purse, it must apply in the same way. So we're really hopeful, and that's the core of what our expectations are about.
I was speaking earlier on to the Deputy Public Protector, and he says that if you have a president being held accountable, it really sends a great message across the country.
Yes, indeed. I mean, of course, part of what has happened here is the erosion of the public protector's power and office. And once the president undermined it, everybody else think that they can undermine it. So, and this is the day I think that is going to come to an end. And certainly, as well, it's a question of accountability. And we've got a constitutional mandate, as you know, to make sure that those who are in power as parliament are held accountable. If parliament can't do it, we must find everything in our power. And this is that exercise to make sure that the restoration of the rule of law and accountability is attained.
Finally, just before I let you go, of course, a few concessions from the president during the heads of arguments around paying the money, and that the findings of the public protector or the recommendations, remedial action, is binding. For the EFF, beyond this, either way, which way this court ruling goes, what happens after this?
We have a press conference at midday today, and we shall advise the country as to the way forward.
Okay, perfect. That is the spokesperson of the EFF indicating what will happen after this court ruling. And of course, there will be a press briefing from the EFF as well as from the Public Protector. The Public Protector is not here in court. We only have the Deputy Public Protector, Kevin Malunga, who I spoke to earlier on. And just let's take a quick listen to that interview that I had with him just before we get the judgment from the Constitutional Court judges.
This is a great day for constitutional democracy in South Africa, in the sense that there will be clarification once and for all as to how you engage these various pillars of our democracy, these various pillars of accountability. You may be aware that the Constitution makes it very clear that the courts are the final arbiters of disputes, which is what is happening today. And of course, there was an acknowledgement by the founders of the Constitution that the courts alone cannot do it. And government cannot be allowed to be a law unto itself ultimately. So that is why these institutions were created. There was an understanding that there shouldn't be a state that becomes too powerful or becomes too insensitive and so forth, or irresponsible in many ways. So hence these institutions. It's a great day which also affirms that the rule of law is at work in South Africa, in the sense that we don't take out machetes and start chopping each other up. We take things to court, we take things to the Public Protector. And what I want to plead with South Africans out there is, once you see this at work, bring things to us. Don't shoot each other. I will give you an example in Bloemfontein. And of course, I think Durban and here in Gauteng, I've actually been handling matters involving taxi drivers. You sit around a table and we resolve these things using the law and policy. So that is the spirit in which we want to see things moving on. And of course, even service delivery. And in other words, and it should also be a lesson to government itself to say, look, you have to be accountable. These are public resources and all. These are things, there's got to be a sense of responsibility. I have no doubt that the government has that spirit in mind. But there's always a sense of an official who is irresponsible or who wants to please the boss and gets carried away and goes too far. And these are the things that have to be reined in, because this is ultimately the future of this country at play.
And just speaking politically, the Office of the Public Protector has also come after a lot of criticism. If you consider this case, especially the Nkandla case, the ANC back in 2014 accusing the Public Protector of trying to sway voters ahead of the general elections back in 2014. There was also the issue around the timing of the release, and we saw that the executive taking the Public Protector to court, trying to stop the release of the report. How do you ensure that the relationship between government and the Public Protector, and certainly the political parties, are amended?
I think there have been a lot of lessons learned all the way around. We have learned ours, and I certainly hope and believe that the state and the various political parties have learned theirs. We operate in terms of the Constitution, Chapter 9 of the Constitution, without fear or favor. We do our work and perform our mandate in line with the law and facts and principles and policies. If you read reports of the Public Protector, they are not thumbsucks. They are well researched. They are written by very qualified, very skilled investigators. We as Public Protector, Deputy Public Protector, and Public Protector, we are heads of the institution. We lead a team, and I think that's what the narrative has to that is never brought out. And these things are not just people dreaming things up. We don't complain to ourselves. We work with complaints that come into the system, and every South African is our stakeholder. And certainly a suggestion that the work is political is actually quite naive and quite unfortunate. And I hope that the political discourse will certainly improve in future. This is an institution that was created to safeguard South Africans, everyone, And you'll be surprised that sometimes even senior officials in government themselves come to us when they feel that they've been ill-treated by the same government. So it's sometimes it could be Aldrin Sampear who says, no, SABC has not treated me right. So it's everyone who really comes. It's everybody's kitchen, so to speak, and we guard that quite jealously.
So. Well, that was the Deputy Public Protector there, Kevin Malunga, speaking to us about the expectations with regards to this court ruling. But right now we can see the Constitutional Court judges have walked in, and certainly this matter will come to finality around the powers of the Public Protector, as well as the amount to be paid by the President and who should determine that amount to be paid. Let's go straight into to the Constitutional Court where judgment will be handed down.
Justices, may it please the court. My name is Dudum Timunye from Timunye Hluyo Attorneys. I am appearing for the applicant in case number CCT 143.
Thank you.
Good morning, Justices, and may it please the court. My name is Mark Cook. I appear for the applicant in case number 171.
Thank you.
Justices, may it please the court. Khosi Lekabe is my name, the State Attorney, Johannesburg. I appear on behalf of the first respondent in CCT 143 of 2015, as well as for the first respondent in CCT 171 of 2015.
Thank you.
May it please the court, Justices. I'm K.I. Chue from the State Attorney, Pretoria. I'm appearing on behalf of the second respondent in both cases. As the court pleases.
Thank you.
Please the court, Justices. My name is Advocate Muiponi Khatla. I appear on behalf of the third respondent in the case number CCT 171.
Thank you, ma'am.
May it please the court, Chief Justices. Good morning. I appear on behalf of the third respondent in case number CCT 143 of 2015 and on behalf of the fourth respondent in case number 171 of 2015, as the court pleases.
Thank you.
Justices, may it please the court, I appear on behalf of the amicus curiae in both matters.
Thank you. This is a unanimous judgment that I have written, concurred in by Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, Justices Busielo, Cameron, Froneman, Jafta, Kampepe, Madlanga, Mhlantla, Nkabinde, and Zondo. It deals with issues of monumental importance to the people of this country and to the well-being of our constitutional democracy. The case provides profound lessons on the nature of and the wisdom behind the architectural design of our constitutional democracy, with special emphasis on the crucial role that separation of powers and the distribution thereof among co-equal branches of government plays in our democracy. It reminds and assures us that ours is a genuine and vibrant constitutional democracy, undoubtedly capable of self-correction and self-preservation through its independent three arms of state, duly supported by our Chapter 9 institutions, whose individual and collective mandate is essentially to strengthen our constitutional democracy. Through this case, we, the people, are also forced to appreciate now more than ever before the collective wisdom of the drafters of our Constitution in ensuring that, and I quote, there is separation of powers between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, with appropriate checks and balances to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness. Additionally, one of the crucial elements of our constitutional vision is to make a decisive break from the unchecked abuse of state power and resources that was virtually institutionalized during the apartheid era. To achieve this goal, we, the people of South Africa, adopted accountability, the rule of law, and the supremacy of the Constitution as values of our constitutional democracy. For this reason, public office bearers ignore their constitutional obligations at their peril. This is so because constitutionalism, accountability, and the rule of law constitute the sharp and mighty sword that stands ready to chop the ugly head of impunity off its stiffened neck. It is against this backdrop that the following remarks must be understood, and I quote, certain values in the Constitution have been designated as foundational to our democracy. This in turn means that as pillar stones of this democracy, they must be observed scrupulously. If these values are not observed and their precepts not carried out conscientiously, we have a recipe for a constitutional crisis of great magnitude. In a state predicated on a desire to maintain the rule of law, it is imperative that one and all should be driven by a moral obligation to ensure the continued survival of our democracy, close quote. And the role of these foundational values in helping to strengthen and sustain our constitutional democracy sits at the heart of this application. And this is how the Nkandla saga all started. Several South Africans, including a member of parliament, lodged complaints with the public protector concerning aspects of the security upgrades that were being effected at the president's Nkandla private residence. These complaints triggered a fairly extensive investigation by the public protector into the Nkandla project. The public protector concluded that several improvements like the cattle kraal, chicken run, visitor center, amphitheater, and the swimming pool were non-security features. Since the state was under an obligation to implement only security-related upgrades at the president's private residence, any installation that had nothing to do with the president's security was regarded as an undue benefit to him and his family that he had to pay for. Having arrived at the conclusion that the president and his family were unduly enriched as a result of the non-security features, the public protector took remedial action against him in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution. The remedial action taken reads, the President is to take steps with the assistance of the National Treasury and the SABC to determine the reasonable cost of the measures implemented by the Department of Public Works at his private residence that do not relate to security and which include the visitor center, the amphitheater, the cattle kraal, and the chicken run, and the swimming pool. Pay a reasonable percentage of the cost of the measures as determined, with the assistance of the National Treasury also considering the Department of Public Works apportionment document. Reprimand the ministers involved for the appalling manner in which the Nkandla project was handled and state funds were abused. Report on the to the National Assembly on his comments and actions on this report within 14 days. That is the end of it. Consistent with this directive, The President submitted his response to the National Assembly within 14 days of receiving the report. It was followed by yet another response about 5 months later. For its part, the National Assembly set up 2 ad hoc committees comprising its members to examine the Public Protector's report as well as other reports, including the one compiled also at its instance by the Minister of Police. After endorsing the report by the Minister exonerating the President of from liability, and a report to the same effect by its last ad hoc committee, the National Assembly resolved to absolve the President of all liability. Consequently, the President did not comply with the remedial action taken by the Public Protector. Dissatisfied with this, the economic freedom fighters launched this application. It in effect asked for an order affirming the legally binding effect of the Public Protector's remedial action, directing the President to comply with the Public Protector's remedial action, and declaring that both the President and the National Assembly acted in breach of their constitutional obligations. The Democratic Alliance launched a similar application in the Western Cape Division of the High Court, Cape Town, and subsequently to this court, conditional upon the EFF's application being heard by this court. It is fitting to mention at this early stage that 8 days before this matter was heard, the President circulated a draft order to this court and to the parties. After some parties had expressed views on aspects of that draft, a revised version was circulated on the day of the hearing. The essence of both draft orders is that those aspects of the Public Protector's remedial measures still capable of enforcement would be fully complied with. As for costs, the President proposed that they be reserved for future determination. It needs to be said that the EFF asked this court to entertain this application in terms of its constitutionally allocated exclusive jurisdiction. That this court enjoys the exclusive jurisdiction to decide the alleged failure by the President to fulfill his constitutional obligations ought not to be surprising, considering the magnitude and vital importance of his responsibilities. The President is the head of state and head of the national executive. His is indeed the highest calling to the highest office in the land. He is the first citizen of this country and occupies a position indispensable for the effective governance of our democratic country. Only upon him has the constitutional obligation to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic been expressly imposed. The promotion of national unity and reconciliation falls squarely on his shoulders, as does the maintenance of orderliness, peace, stability, and devotion to the well-being of the Republic and all of its people. Whoever and whatever poses a threat to our sovereignty, peace, and prosperity, he must fight. To him is the executive authority of the entire Republic primarily entrusted. He initiates and gives the final stamp of approval to all national legislation, and almost all key role players in the realization of our constitutional vision and the aspirations of all our people are appointed and may ultimately be removed by him. Unsurprisingly, the nation pins its hope on him to steer the country in the right direction and accelerate our journey towards a peaceful, just, and prosperous destination that all other progress-driven nations strive towards on a daily basis. He is a constitutional being by design, a national pathfinder, the quintessential commander-in-chief of state affairs, and the personification of this nation's constitutional project. The President is required to promise solemnly and sincerely to always connect with the true dictates of his conscience in the execution of his duties. This he is required to do with all his strength, all his talents, and to the best of his knowledge and abilities. And, but for the Deputy President, only his affirmation or oath of office requires a gathering of people, presumably that they may hear and bear witness to his irrevocable commitment to serve them well and with integrity. He is, after all, the image of South Africa and the first to remember at its mention on any global platform. Similarly, the National Assembly, and by extension Parliament, is the embodiment of centuries-old dreams and legitimate aspirations of all our people. It is the voice of all South Africans, especially the poor, the voiceless, and the least remembered. It is the watchdog of state resources, the enforcer of fiscal discipline and cost effectiveness for the common good of all of our people. It also bears the responsibility to play an oversight role over the executive and state organs and to ensure that constitutional and statutory obligations are properly executed. For this reason, it fulfills a preeminently unique role of holding the executive accountable for the fulfillment of the promises made to the people through the State of the Nation address, budget speeches, policies, legislation, and the Constitution duly undergirded by the affirmation or oath of office, constitutionally administered by the judiciary to the executive before their assumption of office. Parliament also passes legislation with due regard to the needs and concerns of the people of South Africa. The willingness and obligation to do so is reinforced by each member's irreversible public declaration of allegiance to the Republic, obedience, respect, and vindication of the Constitution and all law of the Republic to the best of her abilities. In sum, Parliament is the mouthpiece, the eyes, and the service delivery ensuring machinery of the people. It is no doubt an irreplaceable feature of clean or good governance in the Republic. Having considered all the relevant facts and principles as well as these presidential and parliamentary obligations of high importance, we are satisfied that a case has been made out for the exercise of our exclusive jurisdiction and that the DA be granted direct access to this court. Turning to the merits of this case, one of the key issues that called for clarification was the legal effect or legal status of the remedial powers of the Office of the Public Protector vested in it in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution, read with the Public Protector Act. This became an issue of prime importance because the attitude initially adopted by the President to these powers and by the National Assembly to date was that remedial action taken by the Public Protector does not have a legal binding effect. Like other Chapter 9 institutions, the Office of the Public Protector was created to strengthen constitutional democracy in the Republic. To achieve this crucial objective, it is required to be independent and subject only to the Constitution and the law. The Constitution demands of it, as with other sister institutions, to be impartial and to exercise the powers and functions vested in it without fear, favor, or prejudice. I hasten to say that this would ordinarily be required of an institution whose powers or decisions are by constitutional design always supposed to be, I hasten to say that this would not ordinarily be required of an institution whose powers or decisions are by constitutional design always supposed to be ineffectual. Whether it is impartial or not would be irrelevant if the implementation of the decisions it takes is at the mercy of those against whom they are made. It is also doubtful whether the fairly reasonable budget, offices, and staff all over the country, and the time and energy expended on investigations, findings, and remedial actions taken would ever make any sense if the public protector's powers or decisions were meant to be inconsequential. The constitutional safeguards in Section 181 would also be meaningless if institutions purportedly established to strengthen our constitutional democracy lacked even the remotest possibility to do so. We learn from the sum total of Sections 181 and 182 that the institution of the public protector is pivotal to the facilitation of good governance in our constitutional dispensation. In appreciation of the high sensitivity and importance of its role, regard being had to the kind of complaints, institutions, and personalities likely to be investigated, as with other Chapter 9 institutions, the Constitution guarantees the independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness of this institution as indispensable requirements for the proper execution of its mandate. It is with this understanding that even the fact that the public protector was created not by national legislation, but by the supreme law of the Republic to strengthen our constitutional democracy, that its role and powers must be understood. The office of the public protector is a new institution, different from its predecessors. And only when we became a constitutional democracy did it become the public protector. That carefully selected nomenclature alone speaks volumes about the role meant to be fulfilled by the public protector. It is supposed to protect the public from any conduct in state affairs or in any sphere of government that could result in any impropriety or prejudice. The public protector is thus one of the most invaluable constitutional gifts to our nation in the fight against corruption, unlawful or undue enrichment, prejudice and impropriety in state affairs, and for the betterment of good governance. This is so because the tentacles of poverty run far, wide, and deep in our nation. Litigation is prohibitively expensive and therefore not an easily exercisable constitutional option for an average citizen. For this reason, the fathers and mothers of our Constitution conceived of a way to give even to the poor and marginalized a voice and teeth that could bite corruption and abuse of state power and resources excruciatingly. And that is the public protector. She is the embodiment of a biblical David that the public is, who fights the most powerful and very well-resourced Goliath that impropriety and corruption by government officials are. The office of the public protector is one of the true crusaders and champions of anti-corruption and clean governance. Hers are indeed very wide powers that leave no lever of government power above scrutiny, coincidental embarrassment in courts, and censure. This is a necessary service because state resources belong to the public, as does state power. The repositories of these resources and power are to use them on behalf and for the benefit of the public. When this is suspected or known not to be so, then the public deserves protection, and that protection has been constitutionally entrusted to the public protector. In the execution of her investigative, reporting, or remedial powers, she is not to be inhibited or undermined. When all other essential requirements for the proper exercise of her powers are met, she is to take appropriate remedial action. Our constitutional democracy can only be truly strengthened when there is zero tolerance for the culture of impunity. The prospects of good governance are duly enhanced by enforced accountability, the observance of the rule of law, and respect for every aspect of our Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic are real. And this would be realizable when our Chapter 9 institutions, including the public protector, are left to occupy their constitutionally allocated operational space fully for greater effect. If compliance with remedial action taken were optional, then very few culprits, if any at all, would allow it to have any effect. And if it were, by design, never to have a binding effect, then it is incomprehensible just how the public protector could ever be effective in what she does and be able to contribute to the strengthening of our constitutional democracy. The purpose of the Office of the Public Protector is therefore to help uproot prejudice, impropriety, abuse of power, unlawful enrichment, and corruption in state affairs in all spheres of government and state-controlled institutions. Our Chapter 9 institutions, including the Public Protector, is a critical and indeed indispensable factor in the facilitation of good governance and in keeping our constitutional democracy strong and vibrant. Complaints are lodged with the Public Protector to cure incidents of impropriety, prejudice, unlawful or undue enrichment or corruption in government circles. This is done not only to observe the constitutional values and principles necessary to ensure that the efficient economic and effective use of resources is promoted, that accountability finds expression, but also that high standards of professional ethics are promoted and maintained. To achieve this requires a difference-making and responsive remedial action. Besides, one cannot really talk about remedial action unless a remedy in the true sense is provided to address a complaint in a meaningful way. The obligation to assist and protect the Public Protector so as to ensure her dignity and effectiveness is relevant to the enforcement of her remedial action. The Public Protector would arguably have no dignity and be ineffective if her directives could be ignored willy-nilly. The power to take remedial action that is so inconsequential that anybody against whom it is taken is free to ignore or second-guess is irreconcilable with the need for an independent, impartial, and dignified Public Protector and the possibility to effectively strengthen our constitutional democracy. The words "take appropriate remedial action" do point to a realistic expectation that binding and enforceable remedial steps might frequently be the route open to the Public Protector to take. Taking appropriate remedial action connotes providing a proper, fitting, suitable, and effective remedy for whatever complaint and against whomsoever the Public Protector is called upon to investigate. Remedial action must therefore be suitable and effective. For it to be effective in addressing the investigated complaint, it often has to be binding. But what legal effect the appropriate remedial action has in a particular case depends on the nature of the issues under investigation and the findings made. As common sense and Section 6 of the Public Protector Act suggest, mediation, conciliation, or negotiation may at times be the way to go. Advice considered appropriate to secure a suitable remedy might occasionally be the only real option, and so might recommending litigation or a referral of the matter to the relevant public authority or any other suitable recommendation as the case might be. The legal effect of these remedial measures may simply be that those to whom they are directed are to consider them properly with due regard to their nature, context, and the language employed to determine what course to follow. When remedial action is binding, compliance is not optional. Whatever reservations the affected party might have about its fairness, appropriateness, or lawfulness. For this reason, the remedial action taken against those under investigation cannot be ignored without any legal consequences. This is so because our constitutional order hinges also on the rule of law. No binding and constitutionally or statutorily sourced decision may be disregarded willy-nilly. To do otherwise would amount to a license to self-help. It is not open to any of us to pick and choose which of the otherwise effectual consequences of the exercise of constitutional or statutory power will be disregarded and which given heed to. Our foundational value of the rule of law demands of us as a law-abiding people to obey decisions made by those clothed with the legal authority to make them, or else approach courts of law to set them aside so we may validly escape their binding force. This is how we deal. Let me rather say, it is with this understanding or on this basis that we deal with the remedial action taken against the President. The remedial action that was taken against the President has a binding effect. This flows from the fact that the cattle kraal, chicken run, swimming pool, visitor center, and the amphitheater were identified by the public protector as non-security features for which the President had to reimburse the state. He was directed to first determine, with the assistance of the SABC and National Treasury, the reasonable cost expended on those installations, and then determine a reasonable percentage of the cost so determined that he is to pay. The President was required to provide the National Assembly with his comments and the actions he was to take on the Public Protector's report within 14 days of receipt of that report, and to reprimand the ministers involved for the misappropriation of state resources under their watch. Concrete and specific steps were therefore to be taken by the President. Features bearing no relationship to the President's security had already been identified. The President was enjoined to take definite steps to determine how much he was supposed to pay for the listed non-security features. If any investigation were to be embarked upon to determine whether some installations were non-security in nature, it was supposed to be in relation to those additional to the list of 5 for which some payment was certainly required. The reporting to the National Assembly and the reprimand of the affected ministers also required no further investigation. This does not mean that there is an absolute bar to what some see as parallel investigative process, regardless of its intended end use. For it cannot be correct that upon receipt of the Public Protector's report, with its unfavorable findings and somewhat biting remedial measures, all the President was in law entitled to do or required to do was comply, even if he had reason to doubt its correctness. That mechanical response is irreconcilable with logic and the rights exercisable by anybody adversely affected by any unpleasant determination. The President was, like all of us, entitled to inquire into the correctness of those aspects of the report he disagreed with. That inquiry could well lead to a conclusion different from that of the Public Protector, and such a contrary outcome is legally permissible. What matters under these circumstances would then be how the President responds to the Public Protector's report and the remedial action taken when there are other dissenting reports sanctioned or commissioned by him. Incidentally, the President mandated the Minister of Police to investigate and report on, I quote, whether the President is liable for any contribution in respect of the security upgrades having regard to the legislation, past practices, culture, and findings contained in their respective reports, close quotes. The National Assembly also commissioned the Minister's report. The upshot was a finding that elements of the upgrades identified by the Public Protector as non-security features were in fact security features for which the President was not required to pay. Consequently, the Minister of Police exonerated in quotes the President from the already determined liability. The end result of the two streams of investigative processes were mutually destructive. The President should have decided whether to comply with the Public Protector's remedial action or not. If not, then much more than his mere contentment with the correctness of the report generated at his instance was called for. A branch of government vested with a constitutional authority to resolve disputes by the application of the law should have been approached, and that is the judiciary. Only after a court of law would have set aside the findings and the remedial action taken by the Public Protector would it have been open to the President to disregard the Public Protector's report. His difficulty here is that he did not challenge the report through a judicial process. He appears to have been content with the apparent vindication of his position by the Minister's favorable recommendations and considered himself to have been lawfully absolved of liability. Thus emboldened by the Minister's conclusion and a subsequent resolution by the National Assembly to the same effect, the President neither paid for the non-security installations nor reprimanded the ministers involved in the Nkandla project. This non-compliance persisted until these applications were launched and the matter was set down for hearing. And this is where and how the Public Protector's remedial action was second-guessed. Absent a court challenge to the Public Protector's report, all the President was required to do was to comply. Arguably, he did, but only with a directive to report to the National Assembly. The President thus failed to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. This failure is manifest from the substantial disregard for the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector in terms of her constitutional powers. The second respect in which he failed relates to his shared Section 181(3) obligations. He was duty-bound to, but did not, assist and protect the Public Protector so as to ensure her independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness by complying with her remedial action. He might have been following wrong legal advice based on the Western Cape High Court judgment that remedial action was not binding and therefore acting in good faith. But that does not detract from the illegality of his conduct, regard being had to its inconsistency with his constitutional obligations in terms of sections 182(1)(c) and 181(3), read with 83(b). As regards the National Assembly, the Public Protector submitted her report, including findings and the remedial action taken against the President, to the National Assembly for a purpose. That purpose was to ensure that the President is held accountable and his compliance with the remedial action taken is enabled. The National Assembly's attitude was that it was not required to act on or facilitate compliance with the report, since the Public Protector cannot prescribe to it what to do or what not to do. For this reason, so it says, it took steps in terms of Section 42(3) of the Constitution after receipt of the report to ascertain and satisfy itself about the correctness of the findings and the remedial action taken by the Public Protector, since more was required of the National Assembly than merely rubber stamp her report. Broadly speaking, this approach is correct because scrutinized as envisaged by Section 43(2) of the Constitution means subject to scrutiny. And scrutiny implies a careful and thorough examination or a penetrating or searching reflection. The Public Protector's report relates to executive action or conduct and had to be subjected to scrutiny, so understood. Besides, even findings by an order of a court of law may themselves be legitimately and lawfully subjected to further interrogation or research at the instance of the affected party that may culminate in the conclusion that the court was wrong. But when such a conclusion is reached, the question is, how then is it acted upon? This would explain the reviews of tribunal or magistrates' court decisions and appeals from all our courts all the way up to the apex court. In principle, there is nothing wrong with wondering whether any unpleasant finding or outcome is correct and deploying all the resources at one's command to test its correctness. The National Assembly was indeed entitled to seek to satisfy itself about the correctness of the Public Protector's findings and the remedial action before it could hold the President accountable in terms of its sections 42.3 and 55.2 obligations. These sections impose responsibilities so important that the National Assembly would be failing in its duty if it were to blindly or unquestioningly implement every important report that comes its way from any institution. And both sections 42.3 and 55.2 do not define the strictures within which the National Assembly is to operate in its endeavor to fulfill its obligations. It has thus been given the leeway to determine how best to carry out its constitutional mandate. Additionally, Section 182(1)(b) of the Constitution, read with Section 82(b) Roman numeral 3 of the Public Protector Act, does not state how exactly the National Assembly is to attend urgently to or intervene in relation to the Public Protector's report. How to go about this is all left to the discretion of the National Assembly, but obviously in a way that does not subvert or supplant the mandate of the Public Protector. People and bodies with a substantial interest in a matter have been routinely allowed by our courts to challenge the constitutional validity of a law or conduct of the President, constitutional institutions, or Parliament. The National Assembly and the President were, in like manner, entitled to challenge the findings and remedial action of the Public Protector. It would be incorrect to suggest that a mere investigation by the National Assembly into the findings of the Public Protector is impermissible on the basis that it trumps the findings of the Public Protector. Rhetorically, on what would they then base their decision to challenge the report? Certainly not an ill-considered viewpoint or a knee-jerk reaction. I touched briefly on separation of powers while still considering the National Assembly's approach to the remedial action. The executive, led by the President and Parliament, bear very important responsibilities and each play a crucial role in the affairs of our country. They deserve the space to discharge their constitutional obligations unimpeded by the judiciary, save where the Constitution otherwise permits. This is so because the judiciary is but one of the three branches of government. It does not have unlimited powers and must always be sensitive to the need to refrain from undue interference with the functional independence of other branches of government. It falls outside the parameters of judicial authority to prescribe to the National Assembly how to scrutinize executive action, what mechanisms to establish and which mandate to give them for the purpose of holding the executive accountable and fulfilling its oversight role of the executive or organs of state in general. The mechanics of how to go about fulfilling these constitutional obligations is a discretionary matter best left to the National Assembly. Ours is a much broader and less intrusive role, and it is to determine whether what the National Assembly did does in substance and in reality amount to fulfillment of its constitutional obligations. That is the sum total of the constitutionally permissible judicial inquiry to be embarked upon. And these are some of the vital limits on judicial authority and the Constitution's design to leave certain matters to other branches of government. Courts should not interfere in the processes of other branches of government unless otherwise authorized by the Constitution. It bears repetition that it is not for this court to prescribe to Parliament what structures or measures to establish or employ, respectively, in order to fulfill constitutional responsibilities primarily entrusted to it. Although courts ought not to blink at the thought of asserting their authority whenever it is constitutionally permissible to do so, at the same time, and mindful of the vital strictures of their powers, they must be on high alert against impermissible encroachment on the powers of the other arms of government. Returning to the National Assembly, we observe that the Public Protector could not have submitted her report to the National Assembly merely because she deemed it necessary or in the public interest to do so. The high importance, sensitivity, and potentially far-reaching implications of the report point but only to one conclusion. That report was a high-priority matter that required the urgent attention or an intervention by the National Assembly. It ought, therefore, to have triggered into operation the National Assembly's constitutional obligation to scrutinize and oversee executive action and to hold the President accountable as a member of the executive. Also implicated was its obligation to give urgent attention to the report, its findings and remedial action taken, and intervene appropriately in that matter. Mechanisms that were established by the National Assembly following on the Minister's report may have accorded with its power to scrutinize before it could hold accountable. What will always be important is what the National Assembly does in consequence of these interventions. The Public Protector, acting in terms of her constitutional and statutory powers, had already investigated the alleged impropriety or relevant executive action and concluded that the President be held liable for specific elements of the security upgrades. On a proper construction of its constitutional obligations, the National Assembly was duty-bound to hold the President accountable by facilitating and ensuring compliance with the decision of the Public Protector. The position would otherwise have been different had the findings and remedial action been challenged even by the National Assembly and set aside by a court, which was, of course, not done in this case. Like the President, the National Assembly might, relying, for example, on the Western Cape High Court decision in DA versus SABC, have been genuinely led to believe that it was entitled to second-guess the remedial action through its resolution absolving the President of liability. But that still does not affect the unlawfulness of its preferred course of action. That said, second-guessing the findings and remedial action does not lie in the mere fact of the exculpatory reports of the Minister of Police and the last ad hoc committee. In principle, there may have been nothing wrong with those parallel processes, but there was everything wrong with the National Assembly stepping into the shoes of the Public Protector by passing a resolution that purported effectively to nullify the findings made and the remedial action taken by the Public Protector and replacing them with its own findings and remedial action in courts. This, the rule of law is dead against. It is another way of taking the law into one's hands and thus constitutes self-help. By passing that resolution, the National Assembly effectively flouted its obligations. In conclusion, neither the President nor the National Assembly was entitled to respond to the binding remedial action taken by the Public Protector as if it is of no force or effect, or as if it has been set aside through a proper judicial process. The ineluctable conclusion is, therefore, that the National Assembly's resolution based on the Minister's findings exonerating the President from liability is inconsistent with the Constitution and unlawful. Turning to remedy, all parties barring the National Assembly and the Minister of Police appear to be essentially in agreement on the order that would ensure compliance with the Public Protector's remedial action. The President's ultimate draft order, following on the one circulated 8 days before the hearing, is virtually on all fours with the remedial action taken by the Public Protector. The effect of this draft and the oral submissions by his counsel is that the President accepts that the remedial action taken against him is binding and that the National Treasury is to determine the reasonable cost of the non-security upgrades on the basis of which to determine a reasonable percentage of those costs that he must pay. The President is also willing to reprimand the ministers in line with the remedial action. The only real disagreement amongst the parties about the draft order relates to the unqualified binding effect of the Public Protector's remedial action and whether a declaratory order should be granted to the effect that the President breached his constitutional obligations in terms of sections 83, 96, and 181(3) of the Constitution and violated his oath of office. Also, that the National Assembly breached its constitutional obligations in terms of sections 55(2) and 182(1)(c) of the Constitution. These are the orders cumulatively prayed for by both the EFF and the DA. This court's power to decide and make orders in constitutional matters is set out in Section 172 of the Constitution. Section 172(1) reads in relevant part, I quote, "When deciding a constitutional matter within its powers, a court, A, must declare that any law or conduct that is inconsistent with the Constitution is invalid to the extent of its inconsistency, and B, may make any order that is just and equitable." This section also points to the language in which orders of constitutional invalidity are to be made, namely, that conduct is inconsistent with the Constitution and is invalid. And declaring law or conduct inconsistent with the Constitution and invalid is plainly an obligatory power vested in this and other courts as borne out by the word must. Unlike the discretionary power to make a declaratory order in terms of Section 38 of the Constitution, this court has no choice but to make a declaratory order where Section 172(1)(a) applies. Section 172(1)(a) impels us to pronounce in its order on the inconsistency and invalidity of, in this case, the President's conduct and that of the National Assembly. This we do routinely whenever any law or conduct is held to be inconsistent with the Constitution. This declaratory order is not reserved for special cases of constitutional invalidity. Consistent with this constitutional injunction, an order will thus be made that the President's failure to comply with the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector is inconsistent with his obligations to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic, to comply with the remedial action taken by the Public Protector, and the duty to assist and protect the Office of the Public Protector so as to ensure its independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness. Similarly, the failure by the National Assembly to hold the President accountable by ensuring that he complies with the remedial action taken against him is inconsistent with its obligations to scrutinize and oversee executive action and to maintain oversight of the exercise of executive powers by the President, and in particular, to give urgent attention to or intervene by facilitating his compliance with the remedial action. In the result, we make the following order. 1. This court has exclusive jurisdiction to hear the application by the economic freedom fighters. 2. The Democratic Alliance application for direct access is granted. 3. The remedial action taken by the Public Protector against President Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution is binding. 4. The failure by the President to comply with the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector in her report, of 19 March 2014 is inconsistent with Section 83(b) of the Constitution, read with Sections 181(3) and 182(1)(c) of the Constitution, and is invalid. 5. The National Treasury must determine the reasonable costs of those measures implemented by the Department of Public Works at the President's Ngandla homestead that do not relate to security, namely the visitor center, the amphitheater, the cattle kraal, the chicken run, and the swimming pool only. 6. The National Treasury must determine a reasonable percentage of the cost of those measures which ought to be paid personally by the President. 7. The National Treasury must report back to this court on the outcome of its determination within 60 days of the date of this order. 8. The President must personally pay the amount determined by the National Treasury in terms of paragraphs 5 and 6 above within 45 days of this court's signification of its approval of the report. That is the report by the National Treasury. 9. The President must reprimand the ministers involved pursuant to paragraph 11.1.3 of the Public Protector's remedial action. 10. The resolution passed by the National Assembly absolving the President from compliance with the remedial action taken by the Public Protector in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution is inconsistent with Sections 42(3), 55(2)(a) and (b), and 181(3) of the Constitution, is invalid and is set aside. 11. The President, the Minister of Police, and the National Assembly must pay costs of the applications, including costs of 2 counsel, and I hand down this judgment. Thank you. The court will adjourn.
Well, there you have it. It is on the record. The public protector's remedial action is binding. You can see the members leaving the court as we speak right now, and that is a full judgment by the Con Court. The DA's access is granted. The remedial action is binding. Failure by the President to comply with the remedial action is inconsistent with the Constitution, and that is also invalid. The Treasury will now determine what the President has to repay, and the Treasury have to report back to the Con Court within 60 days. And after that report, the President has 45 days to comply and pay personally that money, as well as the President must reprimand the ministers as well that was taking part in the various reports. Remember the police minister's report, and of course the National Assembly also getting flack there from Muhweng. And the cost to council must be paid. All the legal costs will be covered by the applicant. And that is where we got to leave it for now. We'll be back at the top of the hour.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere. SABC News. We report, contextualize, and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly, and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful, and top-quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate, and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
They are basically arresting him, continue to arrest him on behalf of the apartheid government.
We are dealing with effects. We are not dealing with the causes. And for as long as we deal with effects, we are never going to solve this problem.
What do these people need in prison? Why are they there? The PAC, as Dr. Peku is saying, has been seeking answers, and they're not coming.
What kind of answers are you getting?
I really think I've answered that question.
I think it's a difficult question. I don't have an answer for it.
How was it possible that they could operate with such impunity?
The only thing you want is closure.
The only thing we want is closure.
And unfortunately, I don't really have sympathy for the idea that if you're too old, you shouldn't stand trial.
That's Rights and Recourse with Dumile Mateza, every Sunday at 2 p.m. Central African Time, only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back in breaking news. As you just heard it, the Constitutional Court handed down judgment in the Nkandla matter. Let's now cross live to our reporter on the scene, Eldrin Sampear. Eldrin, a very good morning to you and welcome. Eldrin, can you take us through that judgment?
Well, good morning, Elvis. Certainly a victory for the EFF as well as for the DA as the judgment has been handed down. It's certainly a landslide victory considering that all the applications or all the mentions that the DA as well as the EFF wanted the court to rule on came in their favor. First of all, that declaratory order, Justice Mogoeng saying that this court has no choice but to give down that declaratory order, that the president failed to uphold, to protect, and to uphold and protect the Constitution before he handed down the judgment, indicating the role of the president, saying that the president himself is an image, or as he puts it, a personification of the Constitution, and he has the duty to uphold and protect the Constitution. Say, well, the final judgment there that the president definitely failed to uphold the Constitution and uphold the Constitution. The other issue is the issue around the role that the National Assembly played after they got the report from the Public Protector, saying that they amount to second-guessing the report of the Public Protector after the ad hoc committees, the two ad hoc committees were set up, and as well as the Minister of Police was asked to investigate whether the President is liable to pay any amount. Mogoeng saying that unanimous judgment, they came to a point that those two investigations were destructive to the Public Protector as well as to this investigation. The other issue that he raised quite eloquently was the role of the Public Protector and the powers of the Public Protector, saying that the powers of the Public Protector are binding. There are not mere recommendations, and if the National Assembly as well as the President wanted to challenge the findings of the Public Protector, what they should have done is that they should have gone to a they should have gone to a court of law to overturn the findings of the Public Protector. Mogoeng also saying that the reliance on the High Court ruling relating to SABC COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng, where that court found that the Public Protector's findings are not binding, saying that the powers of the Public Protector are not binding, say that even that mere reliance on the powers of the Public Protector does not amount, or rather amounts to acting illegal, and that is the illegality of the conduct of the President as well as the National Assembly. We are now hearing reaction from different opposition parties that are here, and just listening into what the DA was saying early on is that this definitely does lay the grounds for an impeachment against the President.
Where to from here, Eldrin? Eldrin, where to from here?
Well, we'll have to wait from the DA to indicate what they will do. We know that the EFF has indicated that they will be giving a press briefing later on at around about 12 o'clock midday to indicate what they will be doing going forward, as well as the Public Protector. The Public Protector will give a briefing as well, indicating or responding rather to this ruling. Well, right now I'm joined by the leader of the DA, Musimamani. Thank you so much for joining us. What do you guys make of this ruling?
It's a significant day for South Africa. The Constitutional Court has upheld what we've always wanted for, that the powers of the Public Protector be upheld, that ultimately President Zuma acted unlawfully, and more critically, that the National Assembly in its processing of accountability failed in its obligation. And therefore, we today take the judgment today and we say President Zuma and the ANC that in fact President Zuma must be removed from office. He has failed to defend the Constitution of the Republic. We filed a motion to impeach President Zuma today. We believe those are deliberate actions must be taken, and that without fail what will take place from henceforth is that Parliament must fulfill its constitutional obligation, and that at the elections, South Africans must come out and say, it can't just be President Zuma. It was the actions of the ANC collectively with the Speaker, the members of that ad hoc committee who seem to rubber stamp the report, that in fact it was grand capture by the ANC, and they must vote out this government because we need a constitution that's functional and a country that will take us forward.
Well, I guess that other double whammy that you have here is that you have this constitutional judgment that speaks about the unlawful conduct of the National Assembly with regards to investigating the Nkandla matter, or rather holding the President to account. But you also have this court speaking around the separation of powers when it comes to the powers of the National Assembly, saying that the limits, or rather saying that this court does not have, it's not limitless when it comes to impeaching a president. That's a decision that the National Assembly should be taking. But then, of course, there's much more reliance on politically getting that two-thirds majority to have the president impeached or have the president removed.
This then says to the people of South Africa, what is the ANC's job? If the ANC ignores the Constitution, ignores the fact that the National Assembly acted in a way that doesn't protect it, it doesn't protect the public protector and the institutions given for by the Constitution. This is an ANC reduced to forgetting about the people of South Africa, but rather protecting President Zuma. And I think we will fight this battle all the way to the end, because it's not about us, it's about the people of this country. They can come out and vote out the ANC, but believe you me, Zuma will account for the actions he's taken here. And certainly the Constitutional Court has already opened up a way for us to hold him accountable in this regard.
Final question, also ruling with regards to how, when the president should be paying back the money and who should determine that amount. We heard now Treasury should be involved in determining that amount. And as the judgment says, it says only those features that have been stipulated in the Public Protector's report, meaning that it can't go beyond that.
Only those items, and of course, what has to happen now is that Treasury must make the determination. We support that view. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Zuma violated our Constitution. Yes, he must pay, and the criminal investigation that's taking place in Nkandla must continue. That doesn't absolve him of any of those actions. The reality of it is, as soon as he has paid back South Africa's money, all that remains for Zuma is that, in fact, Parliament must impeach him, which are the actions that we must take.
Just a very, very quick one. Nathi Nhleko's report obviously has been nullified here, but in that report it did indicate that there are some features, security features, that still need to be upgraded at the president's homestead. Will you guys be supporting that, saying that the president must be safeguarded as well as his family?
We could never allow South Africans to spend more money on a president who doesn't protect the Constitution. We will not support any further upgrades into President Zuma's home. That report is invalid, and we ultimately, as we stand here today, as the people of this country, feel that we've been vindicated, and Zuma cannot get an additional cent from the people of South Africa. And the good news about impeachment is that he will lose all of his benefits. So ultimately, we believe that action must continue.
Well, certainly, this is not the end of the Nkandla matter. As I indicated earlier on as well, is that there is that investigation, or rather the lawsuit brought by the SIU against the architect of the Nkandla homestead of President Jacob Zuma, Minenhle Makanya. And then, of course, you also have the officials of Public Works who have been implicated in this saga. Well, those disciplinary hearings are still ongoing.
Thank you, Eldrin. That's our reporter on the scene live from the Constitutional Court, and you heard it. The Constitutional Court has ruled that the remedial action taken against the president by the Public Protector were binding, and this is what happened earlier. Well, it seems like we haven't got that particular clip, but we'll bring you some more on that breaking news story. Don't go away. This is Newsroom. Let's move on now. Former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo has been denying all the 4 charges of crimes against humanity as his landmark trial opened 5 years after the post-election violence ravaged his nation. However, the ICC found him guilty for crimes against humanity after the ensuing violence, claiming about 3,000 lives. Gbagbo becomes the first former head of state to stand in the dock at the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, in The Hague. Now, for more on the story, we're joined in studio by Ivory Coast former Minister of Budget and Finance, Corny Katanan. He's also the spokesperson for President Laurent Gbagbo. Very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, sir.
First and foremostly, the president, former President Gbagbo, has been denying all these charges laid by the ICC and describes them as a political game against him. Why is that so?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity you gave me to explain you something linked to the President Gbagbo issue with the ICC. The issue is simple. We know that they don't have any case against Laurent Gbagbo. It's just a political issue. So before the court, he just said that I deny the charge you are alleged against me. Only that. It's simple like that. Because you know that it's a political issue, it was an ideological issue. So he's fighting for an ideology will not that those who are calling the powerful country they don't like.
Yeah. So the charges are being denied. The evidence that's being presented is being denied. So why are you so against this ICC judgment if evidence do prevail?
You have to pay attention about the ICC procedure. In ICC, when you are before the ICC court, you have two steps before going to the procedure. The first was the primary chamber, who was to see that the evidence the prosecutor is bringing to sustain the crime or the offenses alleged by the prosecutor, to be sure that it is enough to justify a trial. In 2013, the primary court said, in 2002, prosecutor, the evidence you brought to sustain your allegation are not enough to do a trial. But in any court in the world, President Gbagbo must be released. Because when you went to the court and the judge said, I don't have enough evidence against you, the first thing is to release. It is the first principle of law. Okay? Unfortunately, we don't know how and why they remand him and ask him to the prosecutor, go ahead, go to investigate more and come in with another evidence. In the meantime, they kept President Laurent Gbagbo. Is it possible? Is it law? It's not law, this one.
Now, according to you, if that evidence is not enough, did the president have any relation to the violence that took place?
No way. We have to understand what happened in our country. President Gbagbo has been elected president in 2000. Just 1 year later, in 3 months, in January 2001, he has been attacked. The first coup attempt against him has been implemented. And in 2002, they tried another coup, and the coup failed, and it became a rebellion, sustained by French government and Burkina Faso government, Blaise Compaoré, who become now the Ivorian citizen, just to ask you. Just when we have been sacking from Burkina Faso, he came in Ivory Coast, and because of Burkinabe justice were calling for him, to charge for him for violence against Thomas Sankara and everyone, to just prevent his extradition from Côte d'Ivoire to Burkina Faso. Our president gave him an Ivorian citizen who has been president 27 years in Burkina Faso, and now he is an Ivorian citizen. So the issue is simple, and it is that rebellion who started from 2002. It is the one who put the war in our country. You know, Gbagbo was on seat. He was on seat, and people tried to overthrow him by violence. It is the main issue of our country. Yeah.
Who do you think should be held accountable for crimes against humanity in the country?
I think that the best and the worst crime has been done by Ouattara and his ally, not Gbagbo.
But say again?
Ouattara and his ally, Ouattara, the current president, is the one who financed the rebellion in 2002, is the one who do war against Gbagbo in 2011. So if someone must be accused for a crime against humanity, it is Gbagbo, Soro Guillaume, and their ally, not Laurent Gbagbo.
Sir, Mr. Corny Katenan, thank you so much for joining us here in studio.
Thank you very much.
That was Corny Katenan. He is the spokesperson of Laurent Gbagbo. He's the former Ivory Coast Minister of Budget and Finance. Now let's continue now. Abuse by the United Nations peacekeepers continue to be brought under the spotlight. Last year, there were 69 allegations of child rape and other sexual offences by peacekeepers from 10 missions. In the latest report, a Burundian peacekeeper has been accused of raping a 14-year-old girl, and a Moroccan soldier has been accused of having exploitative sexual relationships with women. Now, it is also alleged that a UN soldier forced 4 girls to have sex with a dog. Now, this, according to one advocacy group, AIDS-Free World. But the United Nations is still investigating these claims, and earlier this month, the UN Security Council adopted a new resolution, but an independent panel has called their response to the allegations a failure. Joining us now from our Pretoria studios, the Institute for International and Cooperative Law in Africa, the representative there, Professor Dire Tladi. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Now, Professor, new reports continue to arise every few months of UN peacekeepers sexually abusing locals while on a mission. Why are we seeing these atrocities by the men who are meant to be protecting the locals?
Yeah, well, I think that's probably the most devastating feature of this, is that we have the protectors causing harm to those people that they're supposed to be protecting. We know that these kinds of crimes happen, but what makes it particularly evil in these circumstances are that these men are in fact charged to be protecting the victims, that they are abusing and causing harm to in the manner that they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. Now, these men are often deployed for very long periods of time without a family or even a female companion in the woods there. What do the policies say about these men having a normal relationship with local women? Is that against the peacekeeping oath?
Well, in fact, I think the policy is very strong, and I'm very happy to read to you the policy. It reads that members of these peacekeeping missions will not indulge in immoral acts of sexual, physical, or psychological abuse or exploitation of the local population or United Nations staff, especially women and children. So it's particularly broad, and the reason for that is that very often in these circumstances you don't have equal relationships. And so even if it's what one might term a normal relationship under normal circumstances, because of the particular context of armed conflict, very often these relationships are exploitative, and so it's necessary to have a broad type of relationship, a broad policy with respect to sexual exploitation and abuse.
Just very briefly, Professor, what are the implications for those accused? Will they be arrested, charged and banned from working for the UN as a peacekeeper, and for how long?
Well, that's really part of the problem. There's two issues, right? So the one issue is the criminal consequences, and I'll leave that for aside for now. In terms of the more civil administrative consequences, the UN does engage with respect to non-military personnel, and that would include policemen and military observers. With respect to military personnel, the UN leaves it completely within the jurisdiction of the state concerned to do investigations. The outcome of those investigations, if it is found that indeed there has been sexual abuse and exploitation, then the particular individual will be barred. But now this relates to the civil kind of context. The criminal context is a lot more complicated. And in fact, the UN has been considering what one might call gaps in the law since 2006. The problem is that for each troop contributing country, there's an MOU. And essentially this MOU will provide that the state concerned reserves the right to exercise criminal jurisdiction over its own troops. And so the UN itself can't do it. There has been questions about whether or not the UN shouldn't have a convention, a treaty, in other words, which would make provision for the UN itself or some other body to exercise international jurisdiction over these. Because the problem is that these men are repatriated back home, and then in fact the state is not able to actually exercise jurisdiction, whether because they lack evidence or they lack the willingness. But for whatever reason, the criminal sanctions are very rarely ever undertaken against these men.
Professor Tladi, thank you so much for your time. That was Professor Dira Tladi from the Institute for International and Comparative Law in Africa at the University of Pretoria, talking to us about the terrible allegations of sexual abuse by UN peacekeepers. Let's now go back to our reporter, Eldrin Sampiers, at the Constitutional Court for the latest. A very good morning, Eldrin.
Well, good morning. There's a reaction to this Constitutional Court ruling coming in thick and fast from different political parties, of course, welcoming this judgment by the Constitutional Court. But one thing in specific that we should look at in this unanimous judgment by the Constitutional Court is with regards to the powers of the public protector. Justice Mogoeng saying that when remedial action is binding, it cannot be ignored. He says compliance is not optional. He also went as far as saying that the office of the public protector is one of the most valuable gifts to the Constitution to ensure that those who have been granted power are held accountable. And right now I'm joined by the Deputy Public Protector, Kevin Malunga. Just a quick reaction to the judgment and that sentiment or the simile coming there from Justice Mogoeng liking the office of the public protector to the biblical David and saying that the state in this case is Goliath.
Absolutely. He captured in a very quintessential way the actual reason for the creation of the institution. It was created to protect the public from an all too powerful state, or a state that becomes reckless, a state that becomes irresponsible with governance. And this usually sometimes comes out in the way decisions are made, money is spent, and so forth. So we have a mandate, a constitutional mandate, to actually ensure that we protect the people of this country. So this is really not about individuals, it's not about personalities, it is really ultimately about the principles of good governance and constitutional democracy. And we are very excited. I think as we do our work in future, it will mean that the work is taken seriously. And you have no idea how much, even economically and in many other ways, the country is going to be on a more solid foundation because of this decision. We have literally hundreds, if not thousands now, of procurement-related complaints, of which this particular one was. And then one of the elephants in the room with this Nkandla issue is, overbilling by contractors who just decide, that they're going to have a free-for-all when it comes to public resources. And the message is that this has to stop. And obviously, I also want to applaud the president for taking the right path to say, I think the advice that he was getting initially, I think it was not good advice. And I think even his own U-turn signifies that he understands that. And we are actually heartened and pleased that the institution, as I said, this institution, none of us owns it. Neither Advocate Madonsela or myself own this institution. It must, 50 years from now, be a strong beacon of constitutional democracy. And we are more than happy about that. And I think, so now everyone, and now I want to say to all those people for where we have written reports, you know what you have to do now.
I was actually about to say that this Constitutional Court ruling certainly does ease the turbulence that the Office of the Public Protector has been facing.
Absolutely. The Public Protector has teeth. They are not false teeth. They are really... We actually are there to clean up this democracy and ensure that we have clean governance in the country. And this is what this is really about. As I said, it's not about individuals or embarrassing X or Y. It's really about asserting good governance, asserting a sense of accountability. As we, for example, local government is one area that has serious problems when it comes to clean governance. A lot of the service delivery protests, a lot of the challenges that we see will not be happening if those entrusted were doing a better job in terms of how they manage public money.
Okay, perfect. That is the Deputy Public Protector, Kevin Malunga, there speaking to us, reacting to that Constitutional Court judgment that has just been handed down. Advocate Thuli Madonsela, the Public Protector herself, will be having a press briefing later on today, reacting to this judgment that has been handed down. And as you would know, that a term in office comes to end later this year, I think around about October, and she will also be on the day launching a book. So we expect a lot to be said in that book around the criticism that she faced, as well as the pressure that she faced during this Nkandla investigation. You'd remember that after the court, just before she was about to release the Nkandla report, Secure in Comfort, the executive took her to court trying to stop the release of the report. But right now we have a judgment here at the Constitutional Court with regards to the powers of the Public Protector. Justice Mogoeng saying that the powers of the Public Protector are binding, and when the powers are binding, it means that compliance is not optional. We also heard that he says that the President has failed to uphold and protect the Constitution, and that declaratory order has been handed down. It's now back to you, Elvis, in studio.
Thank you, Aldrin Sampear. And as you heard there from the Deputy Public Protector, that, or the false teeth they had, has now been returned to full teeth. It's a strong body. The Constitutional Court has ruled that the remedial action taken against the President by the Public Protector were binding. This is what happened earlier.
1. This court has exclusive jurisdiction to hear the application by the economic freedom fighters. 2. The Democratic Alliance application for direct access is granted. 3. The remedial action taken by the Public Protector against President Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma in terms of Section 182(1)(c) of the Constitution is binding. 4. The failure by the President to comply with the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector in her report, of 19 March 2014 is inconsistent with Section 83(b) of the Constitution, read with Sections 181(3) and 182(1)(c) of the Constitution and is invalid. 5. The National Treasury must determine the reasonable costs of those measures implemented by the Department of Public Works and the President's Ngandla homestead that do not relate to security, namely the visitor center, the amphitheater, the cattle kraal, the chicken run, and the swimming pool only. 6. The National Treasury must determine a reasonable percentage of the cost of those measures which ought to be paid personally by the President. 7. The National Treasury must report back to this court on the outcome of its determination within 60 days of the date of this order.
The Constitutional Court has also found that the President failed to uphold, defend and protect the Constitution by not complying with the Public Protector's report on the upgrades at his Nkandla home. Chief Justice Mogoeng has been reading the unanimous judgment by the highest court in the land.
The President thus failed to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. This failure is manifest from the substantial disregard for the remedial action taken against him by the Public Protector in terms of her constitutional powers. The second respect in which he failed relates to his shared Section 181(3) obligations. He was duty-bound to, but did not, assist and protect the Public Protector so as to ensure her independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness by complying with her remedial action. He might have been following wrong legal advice based on the Western Cape High Court judgment that remedial action was not binding and therefore acting in good faith. But that does not detract from the illegality of his conduct, regard being had to its inconsistency with his constitutional obligations in terms of Sections 182(1)(c) and 181(3), read with 83(b). As regards the National Assembly, the Public Protector submitted her report, including findings and the remedial action taken against the President, to the National Assembly for a purpose. That purpose was to ensure that the President is held accountable and his compliance with the remedial action taken is enabled. The National Assembly's attitude was that it was not required to act on or facilitate compliance with the report, since the Public Protector cannot prescribe to it what to do or what not to do. For this reason, so it says, it took steps in terms of Section 42(3) of the Constitution after receipt of the report to ascertain and satisfy itself about the correctness of the findings and the remedial action taken by the Public Protector, since more was required of the National Assembly than merely rubber stamp her report.
Now, the DA's Musi Maimane says that today's ruling by the Constitutional Court on the Nkandla matter confirms what they have been saying all along. Maimane says they are fine with the Treasury determining how much President Jacob Zuma must pay. He earlier spoke to SABC News earlier.
It's a significant day for South Africa. The Constitutional Court has upheld what we've always wanted for, that the powers of the Public Protector be upheld, that ultimately President Zuma acted unlawfully, and more critically, that the National Assembly in its processing of accountability failed in its obligation. And therefore, we today take the judgment today and we say President Zuma and the ANC, that in fact President Zuma must be removed from office. He has failed to defend the constitution of the republic. We filed a motion to impeach President Zuma today. We believe those are deliberate actions must be taken, and that without fail, what will take place from henceforth is that Parliament must fulfill its constitutional obligation, and that at the elections, South Africans must come out and say, it can't just be President Zuma. It was the actions of the ANC collectively with the Speaker, the members of that ad hoc committee who seem to rubber stamp the report, that in fact it was grand capture by the ANC, and they must vote out this government because we need a constitution that's functional and a country that will take us forward.
Well, I guess that other double whammy that you have here is that you have this constitutional judgment that speaks about the unlawful conduct of the National Assembly with regards to investigating the Nkandla matter, or rather holding the president to account. But you also have this court speaking around the separation of powers when it comes to the powers of the National Assembly, saying that the limits, or rather saying that this court does not have, it's not limitless when it comes to impeaching a president. That's a decision that the National Assembly should be taking. But then, of course, there's much more reliance on politically getting that two-thirds majority to have the president impeached or have the president removed.
This then says to the people of South Africa, what is the ANC's job? If the ANC ignores the Constitution, ignores the fact that the National Assembly acted in a way that doesn't protect it, it doesn't protect the public protector and the institutions given for by the Constitution. This is an ANC reduced to forgetting about the people of South Africa, but rather protecting President Zuma. And I think we will fight this battle all the way to the end, because it's not about us, it's about the people of this country. They can come out and vote out the ANC, but believe you me, Zuma will account for the actions he's taken here. And certainly the Constitutional Court has already opened up a way for us to hold him accountable in this regard.
Well, what do you make of all of this? Let's take a look at what you have to say on social media. The first one here from Fundo Kara says, now that's quite a lashing that government got from the Concord. Motlale Pule says, Concord, I love my country. Who thought it would ever happen? Albert says, strict and certain timelines to pay back the money. There was a hashtag around that, if you can recall. South Africa works because our courts work. Hashtag the Concord. This one from Nom Pumulelo says, in the end, we are all just citizens. We are all equal before the law. Hashtag Concord. Hashtag Chief Justice. And let's see if there's another one there that's coming on. In fact, those are all the tweets that we have in from you. Thank you so much for sending them through on our Twitter handle. Thank you so much for watching the news. For now, Kendall Makhamate is standing by with your sports news.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamate on this very auspicious day in the history of this country. I tell you about T20 cricket, where England defeated New Zealand by 7 wickets to qualify for the final of the World T20 to be played on Sunday. Chasing 154 for victory, England got comfortably there with 17 balls to spare. The 2010 World T20 champions will take on the winners of today's match between India and the West Indies.
Here we go. Up and over. That's what Guptill thinks of semi-final cricket. Swing and a miss. Has he nicked it? He has nicked it.
Beautifully played over extra cover. Williamson just cleared that front foot.
There's a man out there, but he'll just watch as it sails for 6. And straight up in the air. Chance, big chance. Ali takes it.
Mark of Monroe. And it goes down. Third man should be taken. The plan's worked.
Length ball. Oh, what a catch! Well, he tries, it's down the ground. Jordan again, safe pair of hands, makes no mistake.
Oh, maybe he's not sitting in. Charges.
Another good one, but placed beautifully by Roy.
Here's a wicket.
Oh, bowled in. Oh, big appeal. Oh, gone!
Now, staying with cricket news, the Australian women's cricket team is just one step away from their fourth successive World T20 title. They're through to the final after beating England by 5 runs in Delhi. Australia batted first, scored 132 for 6 in their 20 overs, and then restricted England to 127 for 7. Now going on to other sporting news, Bafana's failure to qualify for next year's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Gabon could signal the end of the road for Shakes Mashaba as head coach of South Africa's senior soccer side. Bafana's entire technical staff is scheduled to meet with SAFA's chief executive, Dennis Mumble, today. Mashaba's future could also be discussed at this weekend's SAFA National Executive Committee meeting.
South Africa are on the brink of not making the cut for next year's tournament. There are 13 groups of 4 teams each, and only the group winners, the best 2 second-place teams, as well as the hosts, qualify for the tournament. Just over a year ago, Mashaba was the toast of the nation after he qualified Bafana for last year's AFCON without losing a single match. South Africa were so impressive that they went into the final match against Nigeria already guaranteed a place in the final. They finished on 12 points after 3 wins and 3 draws. But this year, things don't look so rosy. They are third in Group M and winless in 4 matches with just 3 points.
We've done all what we could do. Most unfortunately, we threw it away in our first opening games. That is why we gave it away. I mean, with these draws, we should be just adding in winning the first 2 games. But unfortunately, I would still say the boys did very well. Unfortunately, it's still the problem of finishing up front. It's by luck if we would definitely. Because if you look at the 2 teams on top of us, they're sitting up comfortably with 8 and 6, I think. I don't know what's the result today. So that alone suggests it's going to be tough. We won't make it, I doubt.
Mashaba took over from Colin Igasent in July 2014. Igasent's 2-year contract was not renewed after he failed to revive the fortunes of the team. Igasent replaced Pitso Musimani, who failed to qualify for the 2012 AFCON tournament. No Bafana coach has lasted for a full 4-year cycle. The current cycle comes to an end after the 2018 World Cup in Russia. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News.
Now to tennis news, where top seed Novak Djokovic of Serbia has comfortably advanced to the semi-finals of the Miami Open. Djokovic, who's aiming to clinch his 5th title at Key Biscayne, triumphed over 7th-seeded Czech Thomas Berdych in straight sets. South Africa's Raven Klaasen and his American partner Rajiv Ram will be in semi-final action against Atrit Huey and Max Mini later on Thursday.
After a tough 4th-round clash against Australian Dominic Thiem, Djokovic was expected to significantly raise the level of his game against Berdych. Once again, he did not disappoint. He took the first set 6-3 and also looked determined to clinch the second without too much effort. But he requested a medical timeout midway through the set, with the trainer treating a lower back problem. This, however, did not seem to throw him off track. He bagged the second 6-3 as well to record his 26th victory this year.
Swirly conditions, not easy to play on, but generally I'm pleased. You know, I won against an established top 10 player and somebody that has been around, you know, the top matches and top tournaments for so many years. So it's a great win.
Djokovic will next face Belgian 15th seed David Goffin. Goffin earlier defeated 8th-seeded Frenchman Gilles Simon in 3 sets. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Now, the South African elite ladies underwater hockey team has been wowing fans and foes alike. Sweeping aside all opposition, they romped into the quarterfinals of the World Underwater Hockey Championships in Stellenbosch, which they played this morning against Australia. I had a chat with Petronel Potgieter, the elite ladies team captain, last night. I started by asking her how they'd gotten their team to gel so well.
I think it's a combination of good coaches and very hard work from all the team members. We've got from, like you said, Zandre and Eleanor, that's 19 years old, to like 44 years old in the team. So it's experience and youth, a mix of everything. And yeah, it's going really well. So we're gelling well, and yeah, we're just taking it game by game. Tomorrow, Australia, and then we'll see what happens after that.
All right, fantastic. Now, which one of the matches was your best match of the ones that you've played so far?
I really enjoyed our USA and our GB match. I think we played really well as a team, scored lots of goals, and at the beginning it was very tight. So halftime scores with GB was, I think, 2-1. And after that, it really happened. So, yeah, very, very nice.
Now, interesting that you bring those out, because you also have a match where you beat Germany 21-0. I think, you know what, yes. Petronelle, before we go any further, I need to show our viewers exactly what the log standings in Group B, which you've topped, what they look like. I'd love to have a look at Group B to show you exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at South Africa, top in the group, played 5, won 5. They won 51 points. Was it? No, it's 5 points, a 51 goal difference. And they've beaten everybody along the line to actually have only 2 goals conceded. One against the Great Britain, which is one of your favorite matches, and one against Spain. What is it that is about Australia that you're focusing on?
Australia's got a very good team. I think they play the wall quite well, and also they're known for their switches in the back path. So we've played them in a warm-up match in the beginning of this tournament, and it was quite interesting. I think we've got a similar style of play, so it normally results into a very nice game. It will be hard, and we've got a strategy how we will start the game and execute it, and hopefully it will go to our advantage.
Right, now, with that said, they played that match and beat Australia 5-3 this morning. They're going to be meeting Colombia tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. to see if they can get into the finals by beating Colombia.
Absolute fantastic, you know, underwater hockey.
Pretty cool
about it. From myself, Elvis Preslin.
And me, Kendall Makamate.
We'll see you tomorrow, bright and early, same place, same time. Ciao for now. Arrivederci.